Welcome back, guys, to the Card Guys channel. Here today for TCG A to Z, episode 10, we have Dennis Zhang, the Guardian Master, the Oldham Lover, the master of all Guardian
Yes.
things, talking about Victor. What a treat, right? What a treat. So, Dennis, I know you. We've talked for a while. We, hang out at events and do all those kind of things, and we're on Discord talking to each other, just like brewing stuff and checking things out. But tell everybody else who you are, how long you've been playing Guardian in general, and then also Victor, which we already know the answer is since he's been out. But go ahead and go through the motions, and then tell us why you are the best Guardian in the world.
First off, that's a lie. I'm not the best Guardian in the world.
You are. Don't fight. This is my video. You have to submit. You're the best.
All right, I'm taking. I'm claiming the best Guardian player in the world.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dennis. As you said, Ed, we've known each other for a little while from Pro Tour New Jersey. I actually looked it up today, Ed. We played in round 2 of the very first Pro Tour.
Yeah, you kicked my ass.
It's been a while. Well, you were playing a control Starvo, you know.
That's true. That's true.
Not a good deck.
No.
Also, number one.
Let me pause just for a second, just to tell this story. I remember we were going through, and you were tracking your pitch stack. You knew exactly when your pummel was. You saw when I pitched a pummel, and you were going to the end. And it was just like, you have pummel next hand. I have to kill you now. Here it is. And I was just like, yeah, you're right. It was crazy. And that was the first time I've seen somebody call out my pitch stack to me, because I was tracking my stuff. I didn't know you were tracking your stuff and my stuff. I was like, okay, this guy's really good. I need to talk to him more often.
No, I remember you pitched the pummel, and I was like, this guy knows what he's doing. I got to get him before. He's not just another, crayons in his nose guy. I got to get him. And I remember getting to that turn and being like, I have to play this Winter's Bite, so you use up your Tunic counter, and then I have to hammer you, so you can't fuse that Oaken and pummel it. And I was like, wow, we did it, team. Anyway,
that's right.
Anyway, that happened. So I started off as I started off playing Guardian. So started off playing Fab during Tales of Aria. The reason I chose Oldham was because the friend who I started with, his name's Young Choi, who's now a div. We looked at the heroes of Tales of Aria, and he goes, "Oh, I'm probably gonna play either Lexi or Briar." And I'm like, I don't have much of a choice, do I? I have to go with the other guy. That's how it started. And once Oldham out, I just been a kind of homeless, sad Guardian main. And then Heavy Hitters came out. I was like, wow. Yeah. And to be fair, I actually didn't think Victor was going to be that good. And I've got another story for you. It was at the Battle Hardened in Queenstown. So that was a world premiere. And it was the semi-finals of the Battle Hardened. It was a team draft. And I've got Matt McInnes passing to me, and I'm with Michael Fang and Brody, and I'm like, I'll force Guardian, you guys do whatever, and then like meaning to force Betsy, of course, and then Matt McInnes passes me a Golden Sun, and I'm like, oh baby, we are in, and I get a Trout, and then I get a Miller's Grindstone, and then in due course, I don't even know how Victor worked at the time, but in about 40 minutes after that, I kill his teammate Vet Fam with the Golden Sun that he passed me, and I'm like, that's it. That's my hero. This game is way too easy. And I've actually got that here. Signed by Vet and Matt McInnes. Thank you for introducing me to the hero. So that's me, Victor. In terms of, I guess, achievements with the hero, hasn't been that many tournaments since it started. I top 8'd the calling in LA with Victor, and then the New Zealand Nationals that just happened, and previously also like calling top 8, Nats top 8, and some other mediocre results like top 32 Pro Tour Worlds. Nothing like super extraordinary.
Get out of here.
Like a consistently average, slightly above average player at Guardian. That's I would put it that way.
Yep, and then you have some great results on just Guardian in general, your Oldham and all that kind of stuff. So basically what we're saying is Dennis knows what he's talking about, so you should probably listen to what he has to say.
Just psyopsing, hey?
Oh, yeah. That's what it is. Wink, wink. This is the reverse psyops. So tell us how to find you for all the people who want to follow you and follow your content, your Twitter and all that kind of stuff. Where do we find you?
I do have a Twitter. It's mainly me shit posting about Fab.
Hey,
Uh,
that's great.
my handle is, I believe, is unban pulse please. Um,
That's a good one. That's a good one.
yeah, so LS is please unban pulse, and I do have YouTube, which I currently am only post Fab with Matt videos, which a lot of people you might have seen. And that channel is only Fabs, um,
Yeah. Also
R-rated,
a
of
great name.
course.
Of course, of course. Okay, so we'll link all this stuff in the description so you guys don't have to worry about that and have to go in and get your note and pen out and write all that down. But we're good to go. So let's lead in to this mastermind of a deck that you have for us here. So here we go. Here we go. So here is the deck with some already interesting cards right here, right? So we got some other things. Hey, this looks kind of generic. Wait, what is that? Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, what is this? Boulder
Your favorite
Drop.
card is
What in
Pulverize.
the word? What is this? I love Pulverize. This is one of my favorite cards. So, why did you choose this style of Victor? Like, what are you doing with this? This looks kind of like Victor, but it's a little different. It's like it's there, but it's like not what the U.S. people do. Obviously, we're worse than you guys, so it makes sense that you have something a little bit different, right?
Yeah, I agree with that one. US obviously not as good as New Zealand.
That's
By the
right.
way, the
That's right.
World
That's right.
Cup details just came out, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna smash you guys. Um,
Exactly. Hey, I'm for it. I won't be able to
no, just
make it.
kidding.
I gotta, take care of the baby and the wife and go on vacations with them. That's just how it goes.
Oh,
But hey, I'll
real
I'll be
stuff.
cheering you
Yeah,
on. That's all right. So
thank
yeah,
you.
with the Guardians, right?
So
With this list,
why I chose this particular list? Well, I think for the purpose of this video, I wanted to showcase something that's maybe a little bit different than what's been played recently. Like as you said, Victor itself, it's the main like 50 to 60 cards are all going to be the same, and it's self-explanatory why you have those cards. But really, where the difference comes in, and especially in terms of your meta picks, are those little like your last maybe 6 to 9 cards. Um, showcase very like evidently, as you say, by the equipment, for example, in the Creator
right?
Fist. I just wanted to showcase for people watching who maybe haven't aren't that familiar with deck building or like kind of brewing new creations or whatever, just in terms of how I like to approach deck building in terms of obviously synergies and attacking a particular type of meta.
Right.
And I don't think it's necessarily the best deck. It's not. I also probably preface by saying this is not the exact list I would bring to, let's say, a Pro Tour. It's more similar to what I would bring to like a New Zealand Nationals.
Sure.
But we can talk about more about what that means in a bit.
Sure. Sounds good. Okay,
Yeah.
so you have some interesting cards here. Why would you play Victor over something like Zen or something like Enigma?
Because I'm not a degen. I
Ah,
want to win
see,
my
there we go.
game.
Now the truth comes
In
out.
video.
That's right. That's right. We're done. Wrap
No.
it up.
I like having. I like playing Victor because it's a hero that ultimately kind of you can control the outcome of the game, even if
Right.
your opponent just shits their entire load on you in one go. You always somewhat have a say in what happens. I mean, the hero power I think is broken, right? Like card
Sure.
advantage, especially in Fab, where there's essentially no draw a card effects.
Right.
Um,
So
the
just to
it's kind of crazy.
just to kind of explain this for people who have never seen Victor, the first time
Hmm.
you create a gold token from an effect that you control, you draw a card, which is I I don't know if you played card games before, but drawing cards is pretty good, you know. And then if you lose any of your clashes, which is the way you generate gold in the step, you get to cheat and just pay off the universe and say, "Hey, actually, I'm gonna win this," and then draw your card anyway. It's crazy. This hero, when he came out, I was skeptical at first, but then I actually like sat down, tested, and I'm like, all right, this is pretty good. Some of these block cards are crazy. So yeah, he's super cool, super cool. So in
He's
this
pretty
meta,
good.
you would say like he's pretty decent, I would think, into like some of the more popular decks, right? So I've had
Yeah.
success into Zen. I've had success into Enigma. You know, it's a little bit harder than Zen, but you know, there's some options here, right? And there's a lot of things that you can do, like you said, to kind of control the state of the game, because you have all of these utilities at your disposal. You're able to present your disruption, you're able to be aggressive when you need to. You know, there's just options, right? Like you're not locked into this one
Hmm.
linear game plan. You're able to be a little diverse, which I have always enjoyed. I know you have always enjoyed being a Guardian player, being able to kind of like mess around with things. So yeah, I mean, deck's great. We know it's so good. Then you
100%.
got
And I like how this hero into anything, maybe other than Kano, which doesn't really exist. It's not a hero. We
yeah,
don't talk about that.
we hope.
You have like at least like you have at least like 40% of into every other hero,
Right,
which I'm not a mathematician, but that means you can win every game.
right.
And that's when, I think long time card players who, are big nerds, kind of like, well, this is when skill edge comes in, especially over a long tournament. Even if I have a 40% into another matchup, if I can reasonably be confident that I can essentially skill gap an opponent in the
Right.
first few rounds, I'm happy with that, as opposed to, having five 100% matchups and five 0% matchups.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Exactly. So that's why I've always been drawn to Guardian as well. Just in general, you know, it's a deck that
Mhm.
like, you know, that you just have so much opportunity to like kind of control the state of the game. Whereas, yeah, I don't know. I find it boring playing these like linear aggro decks. It's just tried playing 5 before. I was like, yeah, this is not my cup of tea. You know, it's just send 4 cards with sword. Great, this is fun. You know, cool. So
Yeah, I remember playing the Mixie at the. Oh, sorry.
no, you're good. You're good. So
Sorry, I had a bit of a delay there. No, no, yeah, go on.
you're good. You're good. So the next question is, what does a favorable matchup look like for Victor?
Okay, so we already talked about how his hero power is absolutely busted. So a favorable matchup is any matchup where you can reliably win all of your clashes, essentially.
Right.
Which means every time you win a trounce and you win with your test of strength, so essentially 6 times over the game, you get to draw 3 cards.
Right.
And yeah, you can bring those cards up for. So pretty much, when you defend with this card, reveal the top card of your deck, aka Clash. And whoever wins gets a gold token. And
Right.
if you remember, Victor's hero power says when you create a gold
Mm,
token with your own ability, you draw a
uh-huh.
card. It's pretty
Pretty
good.
good. Pretty good. Yeah, great stuff. So, in a meta is where you're able to play against decks that like you're more reliably to win those clashes, obviously. So right now we know Zen is very popular, so it's pretty good against Zen. You're going to win most of those clashes, right? In a meta where Warrior might be better, right? Like maybe the heavy hitters meta. I was like
Mm-hmm.
pretty happy playing against like pretty much any warrior because you got to play all your block cards, draw a bunch of cards, and then just beat them up. You got to play like out muscles and random stuff. I don't know if you played out muscle. That might be an American thing, but you know, we were just balls to the wall going crazy with it, right? So, yeah, in a meta where those decks are popular, then in general, this deck is pretty strong. What is a meta that is not so great for Victor?
Mm-hmm. Probably once Rosetta comes out and all these arcane damage nerds
Oh
start
yeah,
popping in, and essentially you can't use your block cards as effectively,
right,
or heroes that don't really allow you to utilize those cards. For example, if you're playing against the Viserai and they happen to be OTK Viserai, and you've got all your block cards, and you're like, well, now I've got a bunch of reds that do nothing, and I would just punch
yep.
myself in the face.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. I played my fair share against pretty much everything at this point, and those OTK Viserais are so annoying. It's just like, okay, you're gonna be tempo Viserai, right? And then they like load up playing all these rune chants, and I'm just like, ugh, here we go. Great time. Yeah,
And
so
just rock paper scissors at that point.
yeah, basically. So pretty much anybody who reads books to send arcane spells, you know, they're nerds, right? Like we just don't like them. We're the
Yeah, yeah.
Chad guys,
We
you
fucking
know.
hate nerds.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right. You know, we're on our high horse on this, right? All right. So let's take a look at this deck. We'll dive in just a little bit more. We talked about the hero power. We know the importance of that. Like the whole deck is built around this kind of synergistic thing with drawing extra cards and being able to kind of outvalue the opponent in that sense, right? And we talked about some of these block cards. So we talked about Test of Strength. This is just a block 4. So it's a kind of like it's syncable of value when it comes to block. It's just you have to block with it on the chain link. Gets around overpower, one of the newer keywords, right? So they started like doing away with dominate and adding more overpower style things, and this gets around that. So you can block with an action and also a block card and still do these things. But the important part of this is that whenever you win the clash, you get the extra card, which you can either block with, which is another 3 value, or you can use it to kind of supplement your hand and be more aggressive against something like Enigma or anything like that. So I don't want to take your thunder or anything and like kind of take this analysis away from you, but just to kind of give a broad overview of what's going on. And then same thing with Trounce, you clash twice, which gives you more opportunities to potentially flip something like a Golden Sun, which we'll show you in just a second. And you get additional benefit. You do not only get a gold, but you get a Might and a Vigor token, which Might is +1, and a Vigor token gives you an extra resource, which allows you to, you know, maybe command and conquer and pummel when you don't have a tunic and all these other kind of cool things, right? So lots of cool things here. These are kind of what the deck is built around here. And you have these in the sideboard. We'll talk about why in just a second. I understand why, because these aren't going to be in every single matchup, but we'll talk about what they are in, what they aren't in, and whatnot. Let's talk about the base of the deck, the main deck, and the overall synergies between some of these cards. Okay? So we'll just go left to right, up to down type thing, just kind of run through it. So take it away.
Cool. So left to right. I won't talk about many of the blues, the Guardian blues. It's pretty much every 6 power Guardian attack.
To win clashes.
They block 3. Yeah, exactly. And they're cool. But in red, we have the Choke Slam, which is become like the most staple Guardian attack, that in Spinal Crush, I think, in the last couple of metas. It just does stuff against almost every deck that's relevant in the meta, and even against decks that it doesn't have like text against. It's just a 4-cost 8 power, which off a tunic is a blue, which means you're using 2 cards to attack for 8, which is above rate. Well, it's on rate, but it's big number. And against decks like Zen, like Nu, against decks like Azelia, the text essentially says you can't play your turn sometimes, which is pretty cool.
Yep. Obviously a great card in this style of meta where there's a lot of generation, a lot of Art of Wars, a lot of Blood Rush Billows. You said Nu, that's an annoying matchup where they just front pump like one big thing. When I say front pump, it's all reacts and stuff. But if you play this card, it like forces cards out of their hand, which you know that now you have less to play around, which is great. That's kind of like the Guardian mantra is like, get cards out of their hand, good things will happen to you.
Yeah.
Exactly. So leading into
and
that,
after that, obviously,
exactly.
Yeah, best card in the game. Is it? I don't know. But yeah, it probably never makes sense. I think that's self-explanatory. Good card. Two good on-rate card, blocks 3. And you know, if you've been playing any amount of Flesh and Blood, you know that when Tunic is on 3 and you attack your opponent with Command and Conquer with 1 card in hand, they automatically start sighing and being like,
exactly.
You've always got it, don't you?
I mean, yeah, we built the deck this way. What do you mean? Exactly. So, more disruption, obviously, in a more reasonable, resource manageable thing, right? So this is pretty good, and you staple a pummel to it. It's just insane, right? So talking about pummel real quick. No, this is in the sideboard, but we're kind of skipping around a little bit. So pummel, this being attached to a weapon, being a club or a hammer. So of course Guardian, we have a lot of hammers and stuff, right? So you can slam this on your hammer, still pretty good. When you do it on something like an AtoZ, it's actually just Thunderquake, which is just, you know, a 3-card 6, which is crazy. And then when you staple it to a 2-cost or higher, which newsflash, that's the entire deck, besides, E-Strike, then it gets +4 and then gains the hit of they have to discard a card. So everybody who's been playing knows what this card is. Like you said, anytime that you play Command and Conquer with Tunic on 3, which means that you have 4 resources, and hey, 2 + 2 is 4. They get upset. Some people a little more so than others. But leading into that card that we talked about that we can't pummel, we have E-Strike.
Yeah, E-Strike's just a good flexible card in Victor. You notice with this particular hero compared to like Bravo or Oldhim, you're playing quite a lot less blues, which means your consistency is not as good. Which just means you have all red hand, you can still attack your opponent for 7, or you draw a card.
Exactly.
And the flexibility comes in when you need. Obviously, Guardian struggles to go wide. That's why it struggles with decks like a Control Dash or Kano. But this is just an option for you to have go again in some form.
Right. Yep. So there's, again, like you said, very flexible card. Less blues means more consistency. So the way I kind of like thought about this card in this style of deck is like it's almost like a blue. So when you have an all red hand, it's like, oh, I got my blue. It's right.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean? Like I see no other color difference. It's just a blue. Same thing with these block cards. I kind of see them as blues most of the time too, right? It's just like, oh, I don't have a blue, but I have a test of strength here. I'll draw the blue. Boom, drew the blue. It's great. Okay, so talking about Spinal Crush right here. Obviously, this has been a staple for a while. Great card, amazing card, like you said. You know, like every deck in this format right now, besides us and like the Kanos of the world who like obviously don't do go again things yet, maybe. They all want to do the go again thing, right? So like you just being able to turn off their turn entirely is crazy. Like, and even if you don't turn off their turn, all these decks, again, the go again decks are exponential growth decks. So the more cards they have, the more damage they're going to do. So you're doing one thing, which is stopping their turn entirely, or you're getting cards out of them, which is still amazing. Like this, it's hard to argue with this card, and 9 is a big number. It's one of the biggest numbers in the deck. So I mean, hard to argue with this, right?
Yeah.
Then
and the 5 cost math. While we're sorry, I just quickly gloss over the 5 cost math on Spinal Crush, and later we'll talk about Disable. It's the same as we talked about CNC and Pummel as well, where when you have Tunic up and an extra card in hand, you're always threatening Pummel. So in Guardian, with that plays Tunic, you just have to remember 2 and 5 costs pretty broken.
Exactly. So, and let's see, are you playing Vambrace? You are. Hey, there's another thing to think about later, maybe. Right. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, obviously, great card. There's a lot of things to love about Spinal Crush, but we got to talk about the thing that got you into Victor. Obviously, the Golden Sun.
The Golden Boy. He's no Okinold, but he'll do is what
That's right.
we'll call him. But pretty much, it says on the surface it's just a 4-cost 7, which is worse than Chokeslam with no effect. But when you sack a gold, and you may remember our hero power revolves around making gold, this card gets +3 in overpower. So gold. This card is just a great way to close out games and push damage through. A lot of the time, it does nothing. Just the block 3. I think one mistake I would say I see a lot of newer Victor players committing to is really overvaluing this card, especially in the early game. They'll park it up in Arsenal, be like, "Oh, I gotta get this 10 power off." They'll, you sack their shield just to get the extra. Which over the course of the game, especially early on, it's not a disruptive attack. It's not, it's not that valuable to send that 10 damage through. But in the late game, when your opponent is on 5, this effectively says you win.
Right, exactly. And of course, that's the way I've been using this card as well. Like, I'm not afraid to block with this card. You only need 1 most of the time, right? There's only a couple of matchups where it's like you really, really need this to like in multiples, right? And it's those decks that are like maybe trying to, like you're playing a Guardian Mirror, but they have like 17 staunch responses, which is illegal. But anyway, yeah, like those kind of decks, you need to kind of like have these cards to be able to like push it over the edge, right? So obviously a great card. I mean, 2-card 10 is one of the biggest like 2-card plays in the game without like any additional setup besides having a gold. And we just
Hmm.
have gold to start the game with our
Yeah.
shield, which we haven't talked about yet. But this
Hmm.
counts as a gold. So like if you need it, you can just boom, pop it. Here's 10, which is crazy. And then
Yeah.
same thing with your hat. This one gives you gold too. So
Yeah.
this has been new Victor Tech for one of the key cards that we're going to talk about in a little bit too. But we'll just kind of keep going down the
Mhm.
line. So just I'm going to very quickly go over the Guardian Blues. So basically anything like you said, if it's a 6 power or higher, helps us win clashes. They're poppers for illusionists and whatnot. They're just good in general. They work well synergistically with Rouse the Ancients. Mato Grande is broken. This is the card that James White hates, right? Same thing with Thunderquake. So obviously we got to play the cards that he hates, right? So Cranial Crush, very good. Even in this meta too, a lot of people like to draw
Mhm.
cards. Hey, even if you just have a blue hand
Yeah.
and play a Cranial Crush, this card is still pretty good just by itself. Like if you have tempo, you send this, it's still annoying, right? It's even worse when it's used against us by a new. But anyway, let's get away from that. So with all of these cards, right? So we're just playing the big numbers, you know, thunks. This one actually has text that's relevant to our clashes as well. Sometimes you reveal a thunk, you get a free might.
Mm.
Hey, that's pretty good. So with all of these 6 power and higher attacks, we're adding some synergy, some you know, consistency to the deck with our clashes, but it also just happens to work really well with this card. So tell us why this card is great.
Mhm. Yeah, so this is one of the only ways that Guardian has to go wide, and that's pretty much it. It's blue. The only bad downside is it blocks for 2,
Yeah,
but
whatever.
7 to go against pretty strong. And yeah, off 4 blues, sorry, off a 3 blue hand, you can play this and then hammer and then still have an arsenal.
Right.
Pretty broken. A lot of the times you're playing this into a choke slam or something, or this into a golden sun to end the game. Your opponent's like, "Oh, you're
Exactly.
not meant to do 17 damage a turn. You're a guardian." You're like, "Yeah, well." Hmm.
Yeah, get better. That's it. I don't know what's up. But yeah, great card,
Yeah.
turn extender, +7, go again, reveal 13 or more. Well, hey, we got plenty of power, don't worry. And then Clash of Vigor here,
Uh-huh.
you have 2 of these guys. So this is a card that I'm not
Yeah,
used to
actually,
necessarily seeing as often. I don't play this one as
yeah.
often. So let's talk about why you're playing this and why it's better than what I do.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, I don't think it's better than what you do. It's just different. Everyone's different.
That's right.
We're all
That's right.
about diversity here. Um, Clash of Vigor. It's kind of like what we talked about playing Chokeslam with a Tunic, right? This card just gives you a lot of flexibility. Especially with playing this. Essentially, opens up your spinal crushes and your disables to
Right.
become a choke slam off a tunic, if that makes sense. So you get two free resources of a blue. So effectively,
Right.
you can 2-card spinal someone, or when your tunic's not up, you can choke slam. Or when your tunic's not up, you have a vigor token, you play your CNC, and you've got 2 floating. And we all know what that means when you've got 2
That's right.
floating.
That's right.
I also just like a little bit of extra like gambling sometimes, because one thing we didn't talk about on the Golden Sun card is actually when you win a clash with it, regardless of you getting a gold or not.
Right.
Sorry, when you win a clash, it doesn't offer clash card or anything else. You make a gold, which
Right.
if you remember, when we make a gold, we draw the card. And usually
Right.
it's pretty good to draw a golden sun off the top. So just things like that gives you it's honestly a lot of psychic damage as well to your opponents. So throughout a long tournament, they're already
Yep.
tilted, and you reveal a golden sun off the top, you win the game because they're gonna start misplaying,
Exactly.
because they're so sad.
Yep. So
Yeah, that's honestly the reason why it's there.
sure, sure. Yeah, I like these Clash cards. I've been playing Clash of Might personally just because I've been playing more of the lower cost cards, which we know that there's a little bit of a
Hmm.
difference here between this deck when we get to the sideboard. But playing things like Command and Conquer, Weakest Link, and also like maybe some number of Amnesia or any of these other tech cards,
Mm.
the pushing it up to a 7 breakpoint against decks like Zen has been pretty good. But then this also kind of fits that role in a similar manner. like you said, it just allows you to, play your choke slam a turn earlier than you might normally, or it gives you command and conquer pummel on a turn that you might not have the tunic counter, right? So like there's not, like you said, it's just they're different. Is one better than the other? Not necessarily. It's just based on the way that your deck is structured, and one might make sense more than the other depending on the situation, right? So
Exactly.
obviously a good
And
card.
you mentioned playing Clash of Might in synergy with something like Command and Conquer. On the flip side, this card as well, it has a different type of synergy with
Correct.
2 costs, right? So you can essentially block with your whole hand, and you get a Vigor token, and you've got Tunic Up. You can play Command and Conquer with 0 cards. That's kind of broken. And you also notice we talked about the yellow Boulder Drop as well, which means the yellow count in this deck is like essentially 2 higher than most Guardian decks. And having a Vigor token or Tunic counter every now and then, it has its kind of edge uses, where in the sense where if you've got a yellow in your hand, you've suddenly now got a blue, which means you can hammer, which isn't insignificant over a long game.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with that. I've actually played this card more than a couple of times. I actually do enjoy playing the yellow Boulder Drop. But before we get to the sideboard, we got to talk about now the best card in the deck.
Yeah,
come
best
on.
card. Broken.
It's
I mean, like, this is not... you create a gold token, that's what the card says, and you're like, oh, that's cool. And then you read your hero power, like, oh, I draw a card when I make a gold. Cool. So it's a cantrip. And then if you control 3 or more gold, you create that many gold tokens. And if you remember, our shield counts as a gold, and our helmet creates a gold at the start of the game. And so when we played this, we got 3 gold. So it's instantly turned on.
Right.
So we draw a card, and we create 3 might. And we have 2 floating. So it's like an energy potion. Like,
yeah, I mean, this card is like absolutely nuts.
Yeah, there's not much to say about it. If you can resolve 3 of these in a game, you are definitely going to win the game most of the time.
Pretty much. Yeah.
A lot of the time, even you resolve 1 in a mid game, and you can swing the tempo like drastically.
And your example was if you were to just play this, not assuming that you've been making gold the entire time with your tested strength and your trounce, right? So there is a possibility that you do see this card early, which is the point of having the Crown of Dominion in the slot nowadays as well, just so you have a guaranteed 1, 2, plus 3 to make 3 mites, no matter what. But if you see these cards, which are statistically more likely to see them beforehand, then you're just like, you snowball out of control with this card. When they printed this and I saw this, I was like, oh my gosh, this card is nuts. I was so excited. This card is crazy, man. This is the golden barn for our horse boy.
That's right. Visit Dad. That's what we call it.
Yeah. I've been calling it Cast Homes, just because makes mites is pretty cool. So, okay. So obviously, great card. One of the main reasons to play this hero in general, besides just drawing cards. If you like drawing cards, this is a deck to play. Like, let's be real, right? One of the best decks to play, or play Kano, or don't. Actually, I take that back. Don't play Kano, but not for us Guardian guys. Okay, so now we have your inventory here. So we've talked about the tested strength and the trounce. We haven't talked about a couple of these. We talked about Pummel. We know how good that card is. So you have, let's go with Sink Below, since it's kind of the blocking aspect between these block cards, right? So some decks have been cutting Sink Below. I've played some lists that do not have any defense reactions in them, just to kind of raise your consistency and lean on the edge of having more disruption through attacking. You opt for playing Sink Below. So what's the deal there?
Sink Below blocks 4, which, if you remember, most of the cards in this game blocks 3. So block 4 is pretty good. That's right. More importantly, I think most people think of Sink as, I'm going to be a defensive guardian and I'm going to, I don't know, fatigue someone or block them out. I think of Sink Below as an aggressive card for Guardian, especially in a Guardian that runs less blues than usual, and when your blues aren't necessarily like that powerful. So let's say your aggro deck opponent is throwing their whole hand at you. Let's say you draw a full red hand, but you've got a Command and Conquer and a Pummel, and you got your Tunic Up. You just need a way to filter your hand. And Sink Below suddenly becomes almost like an aggressive to filter your hand more than anything. So you'll notice when we go into the sideboard, I bring in Sync Below into a lot of the matchups that traditionally you would think we wouldn't want many defensive tools because we want to smash them in the face.
Right.
But for me in those matchups, it's using this card to kind of raise the consistency of the disruption while also blocking above rate.
Right.
So you kind of it's this card is so flexible, and you've also got decks like Azelia in the meta. You've got the mirror and stuff like that, where
Right.
obviously new, where some number of defense reactions are going to be pretty important.
Yeah, exactly. So I agree. Like I said, traditionally some of the more recent like streams that I've done with Victor, it's been a little bit since I've done one of those, but I have not been playing the defense reaction. I'm leaning towards the more aggressive
Mm-hmm.
style, like playing all the crush the weaks and whatnot, and weakest link and all these other cards, right? So my cut ended up being the Sync Belows. Recently, I actually added back to Sync Below for this very reason, is to kind of add consistency with the expectation of Zen being kind of nerfed, maybe, so like we don't necessarily need all of these offensive tools. I don't know what they're doing with Zen. We'll see. But yeah, Sync Below obviously very good, and like you said, in this style of Guardian deck, it's more about like helping you filter to make sure you can keep your disruption train rolling, or it's just efficient. It's very efficient. It's block 4. Like, heck yeah, I want block 4 in my Guardian deck. Seems good.
Yeah, broke it.
Broke it. So then, okay, so now we're going to lead into some of the more uncommon cards. But let's go ahead and get rid of the common cards here. So disable, we don't have Crippling Crush. We don't have Starstruck. So what's the next best thing? This is one of the better things. Makes sense. This is Command and Conquer at home, right?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. A lot of heroes in this format want to play their big 5 or even 6 card hands.
Right.
That's
Right.
just kind of says you're out of one arsenal. You can't play it this turn, or
Right.
if you want to play it, it's going to be less efficient.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So it
Yeah,
kind of just forces
and it's
disruption
also a big number.
or interaction. I mean, so it's a big number. And the other thing too
Yeah.
is like what's interesting about it is I know Command and Conquer in general is like the better card and a little more flexible and whatnot for obvious reasons because you can do it off 2 cards. But this card
Mhm.
is nothing to like scoff at, right? Like a 5 for 9 is still pretty good and to these decks as well, which in general you're going to bring your disruption in these aggressive decks. And even though all they have to do is block 6, they're still leaking 3, so it has a different benefit, right? So if you're able to keep your extra cards, you're still
Mhm.
advancing your game plan of getting them dead, right? So
Yeah.
makes sense. Okay, then the other one that is the most common, right, is Zealous Belting. So this has been a staple in
Mhm.
Guardian, right? Tell us why it's so good.
Yeah. I mean, it's not, but it's the best we have.
It's pretty
It says 5
good.
go again. Pretty much most of our uploads. Yeah, it's okay. It's 2 cost 5. It's no like leg tap. It's this is Surging Strike, but kind of not as good if you think about it that way.
I'm
And
well,
Surging Strike isn't that good.
well now that you say it, now I look like a fool. No, I'm just kidding. But it's like super consistent go again. Like the only time it wouldn't have go again is if you like pitched cast homes or something, or visit the Goldmane estate. So I mean, like, when are you ever pitching a visit to play this card anyway? Like, yeah, obviously
No,
something went
no,
wrong,
no,
right? It
never.
doesn't make
I'd
sense.
rather die.
But the interesting thing about this card is we see that you have Anathos in the board. This is a really efficient 3-card play, with Anathos being a 5 into a 6. The other thing, it's a 2 cost. Hey, what pairs really well with 2 costs?
Yeah.
Interesting. Oh, I have tuning counter. Oh, that's 2 plus 2 is 4. Oh, we
Wow.
did the math. So, pretty good
We don't
card.
read books as guardians, but we can
That's
do
right.
math.
That's right. That's right. So, obviously, pretty good card. Anytime you need to be aggressive, this is a card you want to play.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So now the spicy things. I think it's spicy.
I don't, I don't think it's that spicy, but I mean, Pulverize. This card says you pay a lot of manas, and you attack your
10.
opponent for a lot.
That's true. That's true. So it has heap though, which is kind of cool. So like on a turn, there's a little tricks that you can do, and we can talk about some of those tricks maybe later. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on turn 1, you get to heave it. It costs 7 the next turn. That's pretty good. That's like decent. You know, in
Yeah, it's pretty
Bravo,
good. It's
it's a little bit better. Let's be real, but still pretty good.
yeah,
Um, but if you think about
yeah.
this, it's a ting for 14, which is just like exactly on rate for a card in general. Like if you do the mathematics behind that, like a 0 for 4, 10 for 14, about the
Mm-hmm.
same. But if it hits, which, hey, newsflash, it's probably going to hit or rip every single card out of your opponent's hand, they're going to get -4 on their first attack, which is like just
Mm-hmm.
insane. Like insane value. So if you're able to send this at your opponent, like you immediately rip tempo and you're done. Like oh no, I'm like super done. Pretty much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty much. And the reason I play Pulverize more than anything is there's, I would say, 3 matchups I really don't like to lose because they've traumatized me my whole life.
Okay.
One is Dash, 2
Yeah.
is any illusionist, and 3 is the mirror because I am a toxic male, and if I lose the mirror, I get sad,
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm the
and
same way.
we
It's
want to
like,
beat each other without having.
yeah, that's right. Like the one gripe I have with the list that I've been playing is like obviously I'm not playing Pulverize right now. Maybe I need to start playing Pulverize to beat these mirrors. But like the mirrors seem so high rolly with these new like cast homes and stuff, and you just like getting there and the clashing and trying to do that. Well, I mean, this is more power for your clash, so you're like, somewhat like reasonable at winning these
Exactly, it's a
clashes.
trump card.
Yeah, right? Like, oh, I flipped a Pulverize and they're just like, yikes. Right?
You're like,
But
do I bottom my 8 power or you?
yeah, exactly. Man, this is one of my favorite arts in the game too. Like I have it on my wall. It's great. I've
Oh
always
yeah.
loved this card in general. But yeah, that's the thing is just like anytime when I like played Bravo very, very heavily, anytime I played a Bravo mirror, I was like, I'm beating this guy 100%, or I'm just gonna want to jump off a bridge. Like because it was like you said, the masculinity thing of it. It's just like I'm the good
Yeah.
guardian. Let me win. Like not let me win. I'm gonna earn this win because I can pitch stat better than you. And blah, 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 blah. Well, now Okay. I'm convinced. Maybe I need to play this card. Pretty good.
Exactly.
Pretty
You
good.
got him, boys.
That's right. That's right. All right. So
Um,
other Spicer.
Yellow Boulder Drop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a card.
Well, it's a card. It's I was looking at what other cards. I mean, what other disruptive cards there are, and you mentioned Weakest Link, which hey, was a spoiler card. It's a great card. You mentioned something like Crush the Weak, all
Right.
cards that do things. When I try to choose my cards that have disruption effects on them, I think I'm someone who likes a card that does things into every hero, or like
Yeah.
when I bring a card in, I want it to have some sort of relevance. Where
Right.
where a card like what is it, Weakest Link, while it's really 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 powerful in certain scenarios against other heroes, it's literally a do nothing card, or it's
Right.
a 2 for 6. Um, so this is why I chose Boulder Drop, and also the yellow. We talked about pitch consistency as well
Right.
already. It just boosts the consistency a little bit, as well as the fact that we playing things like Clash of Vigor. This essentially turns Boulder Drop into a CNC off the Tunic, in the sense that if you can put a pummel on it. So your opponent's going to give you 1 card to try and block this Boulder Drop, and then you pummel it, and you take 2 more cards, and then they look at you and they're like, Tiger taming Kakara for 2 pass.
Yeah.
And you're like,
Exactly.
see you,
Exactly.
nerd. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
So
just a feels good card when it hits them.
yep, I played this in the past. I do like this card. I played it more with Clash of Bite just to make it the 7 power. So they have to
Mm-hmm.
give 2 cards no matter what. So again, talking about that difference
Mm-hmm.
between like the Clash of Vigor versus the Clash of Might, difference in synergies, but they both work pretty well with this card. And if they gave
Mm-hmm.
us Red Boulder Drop, how crazy would that be? It'd be
Oh,
so good. It'd be so good.
I would. I would go to LFS office. I would deliver them lunch. I would be on my knees to James White. I would say, "Thank you, my Lord and Savior."
Dude, this is like the only card that we need, and this deck would be like
Yeah,
good for a long time. Like it's already pretty good, but
yeah.
like it would be
Mhm.
good. You know what I'm saying?
No,
It'd be
I
insane.
know what you're saying. I know what
Yeah,
you're saying.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. That's right. And
On the Boulder Drop
yeah.
as well. This is one of the reasons in this particular list I choose to play Crater Fist, because of the disables in Boulder Drop. Obviously, it has a little bit more synergy with these
It's a
cards.
crush
Um,
effect. Ooh,
yeah,
so good.
it does something. Read your yeah.
Yeah.
It's so many people that I activated against it, just like, huh?
So
The Crater Fist has an effect?
are you telling me my cold foil Crater Fist is going to go back up in value after this video?
Hell yeah!
Okay, okay.
Oh yeah,
Good
buy them
deal.
all out.
All right. Sounds good. Sounds good. And then it being yellow too, like you said, with the pitch consistency, it's good with zealous belting. It's a 6. You know, like if you know need that,
Exactly.
you can just do that. It's fine. It has utility. You know, even just playing it as a 3 or a 2 card 6 against some decks, like if they don't want to give you your armor or something like that, like Zen, they don't necessarily want to give you their armor until it's like their go time. So if you can
Mhm.
get it before they like transcend or something like that, then they're just like, okay, I guess so. Block a card. You know, it's not bad. Not bad.
Mhm.
So if only it was
Yeah.
red.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
We can
Okay,
drink.
so last card. Hold the line.
This is a one-off. I was looking for a 33rd blue.
Sure.
Because there's some matchups I want to board out all of the Roused Ancients, just in terms of the 2 block and the 0 power to up clash consistency.
Right.
I know that's a bit contradictory because I'm putting in another literally less than 0 power
Right. Right. Right.
card. But I think this card has its use case in against quite a lot of in the format, like obviously Zen, KO, anything that says you draw cards.
Right.
And just being a blue, pretty good. And an extra defense reaction in some matchups, it's going to come in handy. Like we're going to bring it in against New anyway, just because it might save our ass at some point.
Yeah. Exactly. So makes sense to me. Hey, this is a card that I guess they technically could use it in if they're new and they wanted like an extra card or
Yeah.
whatever. But like, yeah, whatever. Who cares? So
Yeah.
overall in this meta, this card makes sense. Like you said, we're playing against a lot of Arbor and Blood Rush Bellow decks and stuff like that. Obviously, block 5
Mhm.
is just like, you know, sink below on crack, right? And it's a blue. So
Mhm.
pretty good. And speaking of cards that synergize with people drawing cards, hey, let's look at this one. So
Yeah, Bodge. Yeah, pretty good. Like I'm personally like I don't love this card. I know some people are like, this is the best card in the game. But for me, I mean it blocks 2 and sometimes it draws me a card. That's
yeah,
but you do need it, I feel, into matchups like Zen. And I think one of the things I see people doing with this card that is the first time they see an Art of War, they block with it and they use it straight away. And you're not really getting max value out of this card, or you're not using it for its, I guess, the maximum potential.
sure.
I like to use it more, well, whether I need to say, like, literally as I'm dying, and I need to draw a card for an extra block that turn, or in a turn where I can hold back an extra card
Right.
and throw a CNC or throw a Spino at them. Yeah, it's just what I'm trying to say is you don't necessarily need to pop this off the first time you see an Art of War or a Blood Rush Fellow or anything. It has that flexibility where you get the block first, and then later on you can reevaluate and use it either offensively or defensively.
Right. Yep. Exactly. So there are plenty of times where it's like, hey, I really need to dig for a blue or something along these lines, or like
Mm-hmm.
some disruption piece so I can send something back. Like, yeah, it makes sense. There are times when I will use it like almost immediately, depending on the structure of the hand, of course, but like most of the time, it is usually better to wait for a scenario where this could make or break like the turn cycle, right? So
Mm-hmm.
obviously, good
Correct.
card,
And
value
in
of 5 no
conjunction with,
matter what.
oops, sorry.
Yep.
Mhm.
Just a value of
No, I
5
was
no
saying
matter
in
what.
conjunction with cards like
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You go ahead.
it's a global internet connection. It's like
That's right. That's right.
no, to say with all the clash cards such as the extra clash of vigors, and on the off chance you don't win a test of strength,
Right.
Vaj also has, it's great because you get to see what you draw into, and that's kind of cheating.
Yes, that exactly. So that's another thing
Mm.
that like when you do these clash cards too, it's like if you know what the card is, and let's say you tie, but it ends up being the blue you need or something like that to be able to play like a
Mm.
choke slam, you can just crack a gold and then boom, you have your choke slam. Like there's so many
Mm.
opportunities with that. But yeah, like you said, it's like, oh, okay. I clash, I know what the top card is. I'm gonna draw this card, so on and so forth.
Mhm.
Not one of these clashes, it'd be one of these, but yeah. Because you draw the card anyway, like ideally in that situation, so you're drawing blind, but makes sense. Norune is self-explanatory. Arcane Barrier 1, you kind of need it against,
Mm.
Rune Blades or whatever, right? Maybe some Prisms, depending on how you want to structure that. Time Skippers is
Mhm.
potentially in multiple matchups. I traditionally play it into Prism, which is the main reason I assume.
Mhm.
Um, tell us what the purpose of this card is in the sideboard.
Yeah, so it's mainly into Prism. It's, it reads, you can't ALS loop me and
Correct.
win the game. You have to find a different win con, and against Prism, it's really hard for them when we have this on board and also Null Rune, because we can effectively fatigue them quite pretty consistently. Um, it also comes into other matchups. I think some people would have watched my New Zealand Nats game against Damakai on Dash.
Mhm.
Um, it's another tool to. It's a pseudo time skippers in some sense. Oh, sorry, pseudo Snapdragon scalers. You get like a extra action point, so you can get a go again. Also blocks T-bones
Right.
effectively, so you don't just have to give your shield and your tunic by like turn 4 against Dash IO or something. Oh, actually, Dash IO we play Balance of Justice, so it doesn't actually have that effect. But into
Sure.
traditional Dash, where we don't have any other armor that's not Blade Break or Temper. Um, if they T-bone you, you can just put this in front of it. And also into matchups like Enigma, Kano, just where our normal leg piece isn't gonna serve that much, isn't gonna give us that much of an edge. This just means we can go wide and go faster.
Right. Yeah, it's another utility piece.
Yeah,
Yep. But mainly for Prism is the point. It's like it's there so you
mainly
don't
for
get
Prism,
ALS looped. Yeah,
100%. If Prism didn't exist, this would be Snapdragon Scalers for
for
the
sure.
more like consistent thing. But
Okay, so do you think this is a required card when playing against like a top tier Prism, like the best Prism in the world?
yeah, yeah, I think so. I think if I was playing best Prism in the world, and you loaded in essentially neither time skippers nor rune gloves. Like if you were missing one or the other, they would be able to inevitably win the game over the long term.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, I can see that. I've actually cut it recently in mine just with like wanting to play Snapdragon scalers into like more Enigmas.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean the whole meta is gonna change anyway, like pretty soon. So like we'll have to fluctuate and whatnot. But I do see it like this is
Yeah.
like you said, it's a fail safe, get around the ALS loop. Like it's pretty good for that reason, and it has utility in other places. Then we have Vambrace, which is another
Hmm.
tech card.
Yeah, this is just for Enigma.
Sure.
You already mentioned how it works with things like Spinal Crush because you've always got one floating. It's great with just 2 card blue. It turns on your Anathos because
Right.
surprise, Victor has no way to turn on Anathos other
Correct.
than attacking like a Zealous spouting first. And obviously the text on your next prevention prevents one less is relevant against Enigma in terms of a lot
Right.
of ward. I don't actually know if we need this to beat Enigma, but I feel like this adds quite a lot of percentage points that it's
I
worth the
agree.
one slot.
Yeah, I agree. If you expect a bunch of Enigmas, I think this card is great. It allows you to play
Mm.
the deck in a way, at least I prefer it this way, where you get to play your 5 cost. And in a way, the way I think about it is those 5 for 9s become Thunderquakes, right? So they're like, you're
Yeah.
basically getting more cards in your deck that you would want to play in those anyway, but with the price of
Mhm.
1 card, right? So, I mean, this card has
Yeah.
always been good for me whenever I play against Enigma. I've always enjoyed it. I've always thought that it's pretty good. The other side is if you don't have this, you kind of have to restructure your sideboard plan. So I've been testing without Vambrace just to kind of go into that a little bit. And while it's worse, I'll give you that. Like, this card does make it a little bit better, but the structure of the board, it's like you almost have to get rid of some of these bigger attacks to play things like, for me, I'm playing Weakest Link, which I know is like not very good against Enigma. Like, I think it's a pretty mid card because they could just play their stuff and it's like whatever. But you need your go again turns to become something that is relevant at the end of that too, something that you can pummel or something along those lines. So, but yeah, I mean, this card, all that being said, this card is great if you have the slot to do it and you know you're going to be playing against Enigma. If Enigma becomes one of the more popular decks and you decide you want to continue playing Victor into Rosetta, this card should be very good. So I've been very happy with this card in my testing. Don't generally like to cut it unless I'm just kind of testing things out. So, okay. So we've gone over all of these wonderful cards and this magnificent deck you have here, right? And I know we glossed over some of the equipment, but this is just general Guardian equipment. So we're playing Civic Steps. This is our best boot that we have available to us. There's a little bit of a skill gap here. It's like, when do you use the boots to be able to guarantee situations where your opponent will not be able to get value out of the Quicken token. Just 3 health starting on the board is very good. Situations that run up where it's like, basically when they have 1 card left in hand, you know they played the Gogan attack and they're going to do a Chain Ender, you can kind of throw this in front of that depending on whatever situation. You're playing against a Zen, they play a Descendant, you know they're going to play Bonds afterwards, you can throw it in front of the Descendant type thing. Other situations too that I've seen for like just people who are trying to like big brain you, there are situations where at least I've gone in and I'll block with Civic Steps expecting them to attack, and then they think about it and they're like, you know what, I'm just gonna Arsenal, and then I just clap them with a Spinal and they're just like, why would you do this? And it's just like, hey, yeah, you did this to yourself. I don't know what you mean. Like, if you attacked me, I would have blocked with my Spinal, but now I'm just attacking you with my Spinal. It's like, hey, you know, it is what it is. So, and of course, Titan's Fist.
Nice cooking.
That's right. That's right. Nice cooking. Hey, you know, now you have to eat your lunch because I just clapped your face. But yeah, Tunic here. Obviously, we're playing Tunic. We've been talking about Tunic this entire time, but we didn't actually show it. So gain a resource, obviously, and then Blade Break 1. Some misconceptions, like some people who want to play Tech Plating, they're like, oh, it's just more damage, right? Or not damage, but more block. Tech Plating is 3 block. I'll give you that. Tunic is 1 block. But in situations where you have Command and Conquer and Pummel, you get to block with the extra card. So if you think about it that way, right, this utilizes you being able to block additionally, which means that this blocks 4 now in one situation like that, right? And then this extracts extra value over the course of the game. I mean, this card is obviously amazing and probably should be banned or taken out of the game or something, because like every deck who doesn't have some busted crazy chess piece is playing this card, right? Pretty much.
Please don't ban Tunic. My cold foils.
I know, right?
I
know, right?
Stonks.
Yep. You get one of those the full art ones and just sit on it, because those are going up like crazy too.
Oh.
Yeah, those are wild.
Yeah.
I wish I played back then when they were doing that stuff. I'd be rich. Not really, but I'd try. So the only other thing here that I want to talk about, though, is Titan's Fist versus Miller's. Now, I know, at least I'm pretty sure, I think at Pro Tour you played Miller's, did you not?
I did.
So why are you on Titan's Fist instead of Miller's?
Good question. This list could probably be on Miller's Grindstone.
Sure.
But Titan's Fist is consistently 4. Yeah, this probably could be on, especially in this meta with a lot of Zen, with a lot of new, where you know they've got 6 powers, but they're not going to be winning clashes all that often.
Right.
probably right. You get to reveal more Golden Suns. But it's just the once in a while where you sit against the KO and or like a Rhino and you're like,
Right, right,
do I attack or do I attack?
right, right. Yeah, it's like with the Millers, it can be a little sketchy sometimes against those decks. And if you expect to play mirrors, the other thing that I hate about Millers is like in the mirror, it's like such a risk. But if you're playing Titan's Fist, you can just continue to extract value the way that you normally would. Right.
Yeah, yeah. That's actually, now that you mention it, that's the main reason. Is
With the
because
mirror.
previously in the mirror we're playing. Well, I was playing Anathos, but now in the mirror we're playing Titan's Fist and Ormi just to start the game. So
Yep.
if you don't have a hammer to end the mirror, you are no good. So.
Right. I know I played a game recently against the mirror and I was playing Millers and I've been playing Millers recently like you talked about. Like it's pretty good in this meta if you don't expect to play against a bunch of mirrors or a bunch of brutes or anything like that. Against brute, so this is a hot take. I don't actually think it's that bad. And the main reason is yes, it's bad, but if you're attacking with it, you're losing the game. You should be attacking with attacks, right? So that's the way I kind of look at
Yes,
it.
that's
So so if you
mm-hmm.
swing your hammer more than like like one or two times against a brute, you're probably dying. Is really the way that works. So,
Yeah.
but it's mainly the mirror. Like Titan's Fist, definitely better in the mirror. Now, is it as consistent? Like the one thing that I have noticed is that when you play Visit Goldmane and then Clash of Vigor or Clash of Might or something like that, there are situations, especially against Prism, that I found where there might be a situation where you need to attack the angel. Okay, well then you have Clash of Vigor, you have Rouse the Ancients or something, and then you have like one popper or two poppers or something along those lines. They go attack with a herald, and you're like, okay, pop it. And they're like, attack with an angel, and you're like, okay, take it. And then they're like, okay, end the turn, attack with a herald, and you pop, and you're just like, oops, I don't have any other cards, or that's a bad example.
Mhm.
Pretend you don't have Rousey Engines. But the last card you have in hand is something like a Clash of Vigor or a Visit the Goldbane State. Miller's is
Yeah.
guaranteed going to be 4, whereas the Titan's Fist is not. If you need to kill that Soraya or whatever important angel it is, like an Avalon, because they're about to loop you, like there are situations where it can actually be a little bit better. That's another misconception that I've
Mhm.
seen, at least in my eyes, is Miller's being worse against Prism. Sure, if you're attacking their face with your hammer, it's worse. But like when
Yeah.
you're on that plan when they finally like Pot of Greed 3 times and then set up their board, like Miller's is actually pretty good because you're able to consistently kill those angels no matter what blue that you have.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah.
No, I agree with that.
So all in all, which hammer's better? There's not really one. Like they're both pretty good. They're both pretty consistent. You know, you just do what you do. One of
I'd
them's
play
worse.
4 hammers if we had slots.
Yeah, we need like 5 more slots and we're good. Just
Yeah.
give me all the hammer slots and we're happy. So, okay. Well, we've done a lot of talking about the deck in general and kind of like the cards and what their use cases are and like how they're good and how they synergize. You know, like mainly the synergies are between the armor and between the Golden Suns and your cast homes and all that kind of stuff. I'll call it visit daddy. That's what you call it, right?
Is it dead?
Visit dad.
We
So
custom. I like customs.
okay, okay. So yeah, like you have a bunch of synergies in this, your block cards synergizing with that, right? So in general, just to go over this kind of quickly, the game speed for this deck is if you're playing disruptive, you are doing like a kind of middle of the road speed. You're playing mid range, like you know, traditional style card mid range. I know a lot of people will argue with me about like mid range doesn't exist in Fab. What are you talking about? Blah, blah, blah. It's just like okay, but you get what I'm saying is like you're presenting disruption. You're you know just
Yeah.
you forcing some interaction out of your opponent, which is important. So those games, roughly middle of the road,
Hmm.
you know, not quite second cycle, but getting there maybe. And sometimes they do bleed over a little bit the second
Hmm.
cycle, depending on the situation, depending on how your opponent is interacting back with you. If they're a little more willing to interact with you, then the games can go a little bit longer. When you're aggressive, kind of the same thing. You're trying to end the game as quickly as you can. So against like Enigma, I'm trying to clear their board constantly. I'm sure you're doing the same type of thing. Control the board, you're good. And then when you kind of keep chaining these cast homes, right, then you kill them quicker. So trying to beat them before second cycle type thing. So I'm curious what you would think a longer matchup will be like. In general, the only one that I can think of, right, is maybe the mirror, or I
Mm,
don't know, some like rogue deck like Arachne or something weird, right?
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think in this meta, pretty much like the mirror, yeah, like Azuri probably, I don't know, like Riptide, will go second
sure.
cycle,
Yep.
and I was actually gonna say, Enigma is one that goes second cycle quite a lot. A lot of even though we're smashing them in the face, as much as we can and trying to clear the board, a lot of the time, my game plan into that matchup is actually pitching the cast homes to the bottom.
Sure.
Um, this when I get it, I've got like 6 gold on board, or whatever. Playing, essentially 2 or 3 turns in a row of cast homes, with like a pulverize or whatever in between, and that effectively shores up that you're going to close the game at that point. Otherwise, I feel like against a really good like control deck, they can block you out pretty well, and once all your threats are gone, they just start winning the attrition battle.
Right. Yep. That's
So,
fair.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I'll have some questions when we go into the board when we're talking about some of these
Mhm.
strategies against the top decks. So yeah, that makes sense. So it's like a pretty reasonable range of like games that are a little bit shorter, a little bit longer. You're never gonna beat somebody like super quickly like a Zen or anything like that. I think the quickest I've
Yeah.
ever beaten somebody is like turn 8, maybe something like that, like, which is like pretty into the game. But in general, what I see is by let's be broad, like turn 10 to 14 are when games can generally end unless there's something specific like we just talked about.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. So um the next that we're seeing here, we already talked about some of the power cards and kind of like the mid game pivot plans, and we'll kind of go into a little bit more on those for the strategies on some of these decks, right? Because they all vary and they're all like their own game plan. You kind of need to know your role for those when you're looking at your like sideboard and what your plan is, right? And you can kind of see
Mhm.
it whenever you look at the way the decks are structured. At least that's the way I look. It's like, hey, I'm playing these chokeslams, I'm playing spinal crushes in here, I'm playing some disables and some pummels. Like, okay, I'm meant to be disruptive with this style of deck. And the hands, like, if you go into a game understanding that these cards are in there, like when boarded in, you don't really have to think about like what is my role more so because you did that
Mm.
beforehand, and the hands can actually kind of play themselves once you have enough muscle memory of playing these guardian decks, and once you understand the core principles of like when do I take damage to send something and when do I block out in situations. One thing that I one of my one of my students, he has traditionally had like a little bit harder time in the brute, which can be a harder matchup. Just depends on the situation. Like KO can be tough, but when we review some of his games, a lot of times it's like, okay, there's a situation where you ended up taking like 10 there to send like a command and conquer when they didn't have an arsenal because they used all their hand, right? And you weren't ready for that, but you were already committed at this point. Whereas, like when they sent their last attack, it was better literally just to throw the rest of your hand and conserve that life total, right? So, but we'll go into a little bit more detail on that kind of stuff. So let's talk about the core strategy. Now, I know you have a lot of buttons here, but we're not going to go into everything, right? We'll just go into like the meta in general for what we're seeing now. We're still in the MST meta. By the time this set or this video releases, we'll likely be approaching the Rosetta meta. So, hey, I like that. That's kind of a rhyme, right? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so we'll be approaching that, but this is still going to be relevant for all of these decks here, of course. And, not much is going to change for these decks going into the meta besides something like Viscera or something along those lines. And if you guys want to see that kind of stuff, of course, let us know and we can do another video, right?
Mhm.
So going in, we'll go ahead and get the big bad deck out of the way. So we have Zen, Katsu, and Phi. So just all the ninjas going around.
Mhm.
this is our game plan. So you're on 61 cards here. Interesting number. Interesting number. So, balance of justice, all of your blocking equipment. Like we said, this makes sense. Balance of justice says you get to draw a card against these decks because they all play Art of War. So obviously, you want to play the card that lets you get more value. It's a 5 value hat. Pretty good. Now, we're seeing Choke Slam. We're seeing all the block cards, Boulder Drops, Disable, Sink Below, and whatnot here. Like you said, this is a card that you generally like to play into some of these more aggressive decks, right? And you use it more aggressively. So in your own words, what is your overall game plan, and like what is your role in the matchup? How do you like to approach it? Are there any kind of tips and tricks that you can kind of think about, like, hey, here's a common situation that I see people messing up, and how do we get through there and cross the finish line?
Yeah, I think our role in this matchup is, or in against really Indian Ninja, is to preserve as much life as possible while trying to neutralize their turns. So most of the turn cycles are going to look like I'm going to block 3 cards out of my hand and throw something at them, whether it's just a naked CNC, whether it's a Boulder Drop,
Right.
whether it's a Choke Slam, whatever. So we almost have to do, it's almost like a math game, right? Like how much am I taking versus how much value am I throwing at them? And again,
Right.
Victor is great because every time we win a clash with one of our block cards, we get an extra card, so we can block 4 cards and throw something at them, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah,
And that's
exactly.
pretty much a game plan. Yeah, and make sure like you're blocking super efficiently. Like most of the time, I'm going to try to line up the 4 blocks on a 4 or more attack,
Right.
not losing any value. But at the same time, like not being too precious with your threats. I think that's one mistake that I see some players making, is that they'll like draw a command and conquer and they're like, oh, I have to play this, I have to get this into arsenal or whatever. And then meanwhile the Zen is throwing like big go off turn, they're doing like 60 damage and they're just like holding onto blue in a command and conquer, and you're like, that's just 6 block. Like, you can just block
Yeah.
with it. It's not that deep.
Yeah, it's fine. Hey, that bottom right number is pretty important for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing that's really important to these kind of matchups is being able to chain your disruption. Sometimes, for me, like I find it that, let's say on my turn, I'm gonna throw a command and conquer out of my arsenal. I'm going to hold a red choke slam for to put in my arsenal
Exactly.
in lieu of blocking 3 damage because my tunic is coming up next turn. It's just about thinking about the turn ahead
Right.
more than
Right.
anything.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've noticed with kind of newer players, is that they they're kind of evaluating in the moment of like that one specific turn cycle, like, hey, what do I do? I'm gonna send a command and conquer and whatnot. And that's fine. Like that kind of builds the fundamentals to an extent, but like the next level up, like you said, is just, I know my tunic counter is coming up the following turn. I have this choke slam. I set it up. I put it in arsenal. Now I have consistent disruption to be able to continue throughout the game, and it's extremely important, and will make or break those matchups, right? Because if you pull tempo and you rip 2 cards out of their hand when you play that command and conquer, yeah, that's great. But oh no, I drew all blues, or like something random that just doesn't matter, and now you just have to like block with a couple of cards, send hammer and pass. Like they will eat that hammer up like, it's dessert after dinner. You know what I'm saying? It's just going to be like, yeah, give it to me. I don't care. What is my love total? Oh, I'm not dead. Take it. It's literally that simple. So yeah, just the important part is, like, you don't want to send hammer in these matchups. That's the big thing. You want to send these disruptive attacks. Like, that's important. Late game, you can send hammer. They're at 1. That's pretty good. It takes 2 cards. But other
Yeah.
than that,
Like a lot of the time, like early game, if you have an extra blue and they're throwing like a 2 attack or even a tiger to end the chain, like the thought process is like, this blocks 3, like it's blocking 1 life. I'm attacking for 4. Like
right,
theoretically, attacking for 4 is better, but in some instances, you just want to block the 1 with
right,
the 3. Like, yeah, which sounds weird, but
correct,
it's gonna serve your game plan better overall.
right. Yeah, and the other thing
Uh,
that you noted a little bit too, just to touch base. So another thing that I've seen is that if somebody is presenting something along the lines of a tiger swipe and it's coming in 4/4, I'll see people block in a way with their armor and a card to where they're losing a value point for that for the defense, right? Where they could have maybe blocked with their armor previously in a different way, or not blocked with their gloves to be able to cover up that 4 with your 2 armor and use the card for a different way. So you're losing a point of value in that sense. Same thing, using your balance of justice, like we talked about a little bit earlier, kind of gauging when the best spot to use that is. Yeah, so like basically extract every point of value in these matchups that you can over the turn cycles. And I've said this countless times on videos and streams and whatnot. It's like even though it looks like they're doing more than you because they send 30 damage in one turn, overall over the course of the game, because of the amount that you're doing over the course of the regular turn cycles, you actually end up better. If you look at that at a pure mathematical standpoint, when you look at the summation of everything, your numbers are better, which is why you're winning, right?
Correct.
Cool. Any closing thoughts about Zen?
Yes. One thing is about the math around their armor. Because once they've transcended and have a chi in deck, you have to realize that at any point they can stuff their entire armor suite at you, and go off. Which means even though your Command and Conquer looks really attractive to throw at them, it's not going to do anything. So you don't need to take a bunch of damage to throw a CNC at them. And there's one particular reason in this matchup I really like Crater Fist. And to be honest, like I've been venting to a couple of teammates about this. If I had Crater Fist in the New Zealand Nationals, I would have won that top 8 game 100%. Rather than Gauntlet of Iron Will, because I needed that breakpoint against the Zen in the top 8. I could have taken extra damage and Crater Fisted a Spinal Crush, and effectively they would have had no way to come back from the game because the entire armor suite can't block the breakpoint. But yeah, that's hindsight, and obviously Iron Will had its use in other scenarios, but in that particular case, especially against Zen, like your Crater Fist, look at the text on it. Late game, you want to combine it with something in a sense that they can't just stuff their armor at you.
Exactly. Yep. Which makes a lot of sense. There are some matchups where Iron Will is generally a little bit better. We're in a meta where it's like it's not very many though that is like super justified. So there is a lot of reason to play the Crater Fist, like you said. Having the extra value for something like a Spinal to push that to 11, which is very difficult to stop. Right? They can't just shove their armor, right? So that's the important part. Cool. Yeah. So in general, favorite matchup.
Yeah. I like to think so.
Yeah. Okay. Main reason to play Victor is this right here. Now, let's talk about one of the matchups where Gauntlets of Iron Will actually can have a little bit of text. One of the only ones here that we're going to be talking about today, and that is new.
New's generally pretty hard, and I have to admit I don't have the most experience into this matchup. And my MO with matchups I don't have a lot of experience in is I go Crown of Dominion and I try to kill them, as opposed to going to the late game, because like to put it honestly, like if you're playing against someone who's really familiar with the deck, you don't want to play, like you want to play as short as possible,
right?
Because their edge is going to be bigger over you. Like I don't know if many people familiar, with like poker terms. It's like you want to play against, if you're playing against bad players, you want to play against them as much as possible because your natural edge will win you the game. Yeah. So that's opposite in this case. Because New's a hard matchup, we don't want to go super long, and also because I personally am not that good into that matchup, I want to end it as quickly as possible. So yeah, you'll see that the sideboard is almost the same as into Zen,
right?
Other than the hat.
Yeah, so I generally agree here. So I want to end this matchup as quickly as possible, because the longer the game goes, they have more chi in their deck, the more they're able to do their things, and just extract value from your blue 8s and whatnot, all these other cards, and be able to just have like a big go off turn. And it's so annoying when they attack with your own cards. You're just like, ugh, I know my cards are big. I get it, right? So one reason to not play Terra Sunder in these style of decks, because if they play Terra Sunder onto like any Guardian attack, you just want to jump off a bridge. And the game's like over on the spot pretty much. But yeah,
and that's not the reason you see in the sideboard. The only blue I side out is the blue Disable. I know people like to take out the Macho Grandes, but I'm just like if I'm trying to kill you, I want my 6-card hand or whatever. I want my 5-card hand. So I don't want to be disrupted. You can hit me with Magic Grande, but I don't want my arsenal to go away.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm generally the same way. I've had a couple of like thought processes with that too. I actually do side out some blues just like you. I've cut one ofs of Disable and Cranial and then like a Macho and so on and so forth. And the main thought process behind that is that they play a Bonds and you have 2 copies of a single card, like one of your single blues. You are literally forced into a line of blocking. There's no other way that you can do about it. Like, because if they hit, which they are likely to hit, they're going to take both of your blues and then go get the other one from your deck, and then your turn is just like literally completely unplayable. So you're forced into just blocking out, which is very frustrating, which is why this is one of the more annoying matchups in this. But it does make sense. Like, I do cut one of these as well. I can see cutting all 3 because this is the disrupted one that's annoying. They can also Fang Strike it and make it at 8. So if you do block for 4, you know, and you're like, hey, yeah, I did the thing that you do to me all the time. I'm all right, fine. So it makes sense not playing Pulverize too, because oh no, my dagger is 0 over, right?
Wow.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
they Sirens call it anyway. You're like, wow, I just blocked 3 on a -3. Great.
Correct. Yep, exactly. So yeah, you do that, and then Zealous Belting. I played around with this card like in the board before too, just to, again, like if we're wanting to end the game quickly, this is a card to help end the game quickly. But of course, these cards are great. Sink Below is great on certain situations where it's just like, oh, okay, you're playing a surgical extraction. I wonder what this could be. And you block for 5, and then they're just like, haha, hiss, haha, Fang Strike, and you're just like, sink. And they're like, oh. So makes sense to
And
me.
then you still lose because we suck.
I mean, as long as you
But
kill them, you're good.
yeah. Moral high ground for 1 turn. You're like, yes, we've blocked it.
I blocked with all of my hand. Pass.
Yeah, but I think honestly, Nu is not the worst matchup, like as some people think. I think once you get a lot of reps into that hero, it's closer to an even matchup. Maybe that's Copium.
I think,
but it's not like an auto loss. Yeah.
It's not an auto loss for sure, but it is definitely unfavored against like a really good Nu, like playing against Xing, for example.
You know?
Yeah, it's like that's rough. That's real rough. It's like, oh my god, this feels awful. But when MST first came out and Nu was spoiled, I was just like, oh, it's over. It's over. I can't do anything about this. Like, Guardian's dead. I might as well go to another class. And then I played it a little bit more, and the initial games were like that. I was just like, this is like actually impossible. What the heck? And then I figured out like, oh, if I'm a little more aggressive, this kind of works sometimes. And then, like, of course you tweak, and then you get to something like what we're seeing on the screen now, to where you're playing obviously all of your block cards and you're extracting value through that, and then you're just being aggressive. In general, what I see with Assassin is like, sure, they're disruptive and they do things, but if you play in a way that can mitigate their disruption to you, and you can still have a relevant turn the following turn, our numbers, even though we're Guardian, are generally better, which is kind of funny to think about, right? Like, okay, they did 8 and ripped a card from you. It's like, cool, here's 9. And they're just like, oh, okay. That kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So just to kind of wrap it up, not hopeless, but definitely a little unfavored. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. You don't want to see one, but you're also not like, I'm gonna go jump off this building right now.
Right. Yep. Makes sense. Okay, so Nu, done with you. Let's go into the mirror. That's the next one I have on my list. So the Victor mirror here. And again, we talked about how you are playing Crown of Dominion and the Aurum Aegis as opposed to the Anathos. Before Cast Homes came out, it was Anathos, and we did play that more generally. It made a whole lot more sense to do that, even though you couldn't consistently turn this on without having your extra go-again cards or over pitching. This was still like the correct move, I believe. But now that we have the guaranteed gold in 2 places, and then we can guarantee that our our cast homes is going to be a +3 might. Like, oh, we already talked about how broken this is.
Mhm.
When we can guarantee that it is broken, we want to do that because just I've talked about this kind of stuff before on streams and whatnot, but the mathematical value of having Aura Mages and Crown of Dominion versus Anathos and a blocking hat, it's actually outweighed by playing it this way because it's the same amount of block, but you're getting more value over the course of the game than something like the Anathos, even if you're playing all of these Go Game cards. So
Mhm. Mhm.
you're playing 65 cards here, a little bit
I
more than
am.
usual, which, I tend to kind of range between this area
Mhm.
too. Makes sense.
Yeah. And I think the one card that I'm not too sure about in the mirror are the sink blows. That's really the only thing. I could go down
Yeah.
to 62, just remove the sinks, because against um in the mirror, like there's not that many uses for sink below other than it's a block 4 and it stops like the pummel threat. But to be honest, against a good Victor opponent, the pummels are always coming on Command and Conquers.
Correct.
Like it's or like a Golden Sun, which you can't stop anyway. Um, yeah, I do have the sinks in this particular list because I'm not running the Gauntlet of Iron Will, which is really good against Command and Conquer Pummel because you can essentially overblock twice in a game and be happy. So yeah, that's the only thing I'm not too sure about, especially because we're playing more of these big number cards like Pulverize and Red Disables over other traditional victors at the moment, which means our clash consistency is going to be higher. So it might make sense to remove the clash losing cards as much as
Right.
possible.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. So, like you said, sink below against like more experienced victors. Like you said, they're the command and conquers are going to usually be stapled with the pummel. They're going to set up those lines and whatnot, right? They're going to kind of wait that out for those opportunities. And if you're caught with a sink below in hand or an arsenal in that situation, it's just like really bad news because you either got to
Mm,
just eat it and let it happen, which is bad, or you just can't do anything about it anyway because it's in your hand. You can't block it all anyway, right? So it's just like it's bad news all around most of the time.
mhm,
There is merit to it, obviously, like this card being efficient for a block. You can stop their hammers and do all these kind of things. You just got to make sure it doesn't line up with their command and conquers and pummels. Other things with this too is if I am playing Sync Below, which I do have it in my configuration right now as well, um, I will block with it as quickly and as efficiently as possible
mhm.
because this isn't a
Yeah.
deck. When you're playing the mirror, it's like you don't really have to worry about like dominate like Bravo has,
Mhm,
for
mhm.
instance, with like these on hit crush effects. You have the ability to block with these cards. It being a defense reaction doesn't really benefit you very much at all, right? Like it
Mm,
having those texts doesn't really matter. It gives you flexibility being able to put in an arsenal, obviously, but like in general, I'm okay with just like when I draw it and I have the opportunity to use it, as long as I can use the rest of my cards, I'm happy to just lay it down and go ahead and
100%.
get it out of the way, right? So one
Mhm.
thing that you're playing here, so you're not playing Hold the Line and you're not playing Zealous Belting here, which is interesting to me because I actually do play Zealous Belting in the mirror. Let's talk about that. Why are you not playing Zealous Belting? I know it's not as
Yeah,
good with the small hammer, but like it's Go Again
that's
is pretty good.
that's pretty much the reason. It's not as good as without Anathos, because like 3 card 9, even though with a go again, it's just whatever. It
It's kind of
also
okay.
every time you go again in the matchup with, especially with Zealous Belting and 1 card left, it just gives your opponent a free block on their shoes.
Sure.
You really want to put your opponent in a situation where it's like they have to think about when they're going to use their civic steps, and ideally by the end of the game they haven't even blocked with it yet. And you kill them because they've never been presented a good opportunity to block with it safely.
Right.
Um, I mean, I'm not saying Zealous Belting is bad. It's just a red. It blocks for 2. I would
Yep.
rather throw like a naked disable, even though it's not going to hit. It's the same thing, but
Sure.
it's more flexible because it blocks for more.
Exactly. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. So mathematically speaking, you have your 2 for 5, and then you're not your 4, which is 3 card 9. It's the same thing as your
Mhm.
disable, same thing as your spinal crush. Makes sense. Um, the other argument is like, okay, well, you play Zealous Belting, you can pummel the Zealous Belting. Well, okay, you
Yeah,
can do the same thing with those cards too. And again, we
yeah,
talked about like we want to put pummel on Command and Conquer as many times as we can anyway.
Mhm.
So that argument is kind of invalidated in a sense as well. The only difference now is that you are losing block value by playing Zealous Belting versus these other 3-card 9s. This makes a lot of sense. I'm about to cut this card from my deck too. Ready to go.
Yeah, and also just like clash consistency, like obviously
Yeah.
5 loses to a 6, and you're just like, oh,
Exactly.
like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. I think that's
Yeah.
brilliant. The other thing that I've been hit or miss on, I've played this card in the mirror, I've taken it out of the mirror, put it back in, taken it
Mm,
back out. I just go back and forth because it seems like most of the time when I play it, I'm the unlucky one and I lose the trounce. And then when my
yeah.
opponent plays it and they high roll and they win the trounce, it's just like, oh, what the heck,
It's like a skill game, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, um, I I know we've talked about this before. I'm curious if you still do this. Are you trying to pitch deck this card still?
As much as possible.
Yeah.
Like if I E-strike for 7, I'm bottoming it. If I'm sync
Right.
blowing, I'm bottoming it early game, and then I'm gonna put a Spinal under it. I'm gonna put Pulverize under it, like just to guarantee at least I'm not losing in the second cycle. Um, but you don't get to do that all the time,
Sure.
obviously.
So
Yeah.
that's an interesting point, and this has always been a thing of mine because like you never know specifically like when you're going to draw that if that's going to be card number 4. And sure,
Mm.
if it is card number 4, then okay, that's the Pulverize on top. But like in a situation like that, um, are you like thinking about like when you pitch, do you actually count how many cards you have left to see like when you're going to draw it?
If I'm in an on-time situation, yeah, like
Okay.
100%. I'll
Okay.
know exactly what card that I'm going to draw into, and obviously it's a little bit harder, Victor, because winning clashes and also maybe drawing cards of gold,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
it's a little bit harder. But if you had unlimited time, anyone can do it. Like you can math out how many more times you're going to sink or
Right.
potentially potentially draw cards in the game.
Right.
And you can also manipulate your gold drawing later on to kind of work
So
around
yeah,
it.
yeah, to
But
kind of fix it,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
again, I'm not going to be doing that unless it's top 8 of a major tournament. It's a Swiss round is just guesstimation. Like I'm going to put trounce. I know I've got, let's say, 16 cards in the grave, and I'm running 65 cards, which means 49 cards left.
Right.
Well, minus my hand. Then everything's a multiples of 4, right? So to be safe, I'll put something else under it, like a random thing, and then I'll put a Pulverize. And more or less by then you're like, okay, I'm not going to draw into it in the same hand, and then I'm going to get it for 14 and an 8 and another 8. It's like,
Right.
it's almost guaranteed you're not going to lose.
Right. Yep. No, that makes sense. That's something I need to practice more on myself for
Mhm.
sure. So I get the general basis of that. It's just like when I'm playing tournaments, that's something that like there's so many things to think about that's like one extra thing. It's just like you said, like in a Swiss round, maybe it's not worth it in that sense. Like, yeah, you can do a guesstimation, like you said. You have 16 cards engraved. Go through that. Okay, yeah, I don't want them right next to each other because they're like actively not great if you draw them in the same hand. So maybe put like a cranial crush in the middle, and then like, hey,
Yeah.
like if you did happen to like win a clash or lose a clash, they bottom a clash, do something along those lines, right? Then if you did, at least you reveal an 8, right? So there's like a
Mhm.
little bit of a fail safe there. Okay,
Yeah. And honestly, with this list, like we're not, even if you use transfer cycle, you're not gonna lose that often. Like you're not gonna double lose that often, I should say.
sure.
Versus for like a more typical mirror that's not running pulverizers and the bigger powers.
Right,
So it's kind of fine. Like my suggestion is just to not plan your turn as though you're gonna win the trance. Like just
right,
use it as a 3 block, and
right.
yeah.
Yep, makes sense. Yeah,
Mhm.
worst case scenario. Well, I say worst case scenario. The majority of the scenarios are going to be like you're going to tie or something along those
Mm-hmm.
lines. Like you both reveal 6s, and then next clash is somebody wins. It doesn't matter. Like neither of you. Yeah, it is what it is. It's just 3 block, which is
Yeah.
still better than Zealous Belting. I can't believe it. I can't
That
believe I hadn't
is.
thought about that.
Well, on that note about tying, I think I don't know if you've covered this interaction in your streams before, but I think one thing worth mentioning is that if you tie a clash, remember the turn player has priority on
Right,
who essentially to layer the triggers. So you will always, well, you should always put your opponent Victor trigger first on whether they want to reclash,
right,
because then they have the decision whether they want to bottom or not, and then you can act based on whether they choose to or not.
sure,
And then if you reclash again and they lose, they just won't have the essentially they won't have the opportunity to re-trigger the hero power.
Right. No, I have not actually covered that interaction. That's a good point. Most of the time on Talishar, it just does it automatically, which is why I've never covered it. But that's a great point. Is that, I mean, the more information for you is better. So like when you're blocking with a trounce, obviously you let them make the decision first, which is a big deal for sure.
Yeah.
And same thing with test strength, obviously, right? One thing to note with these decks is, in general, let's do quick exercise, right? So if you reveal a buckling blow and your opponent reveals a cranial crush, are you bottoming the card?
Probably not.
Exactly. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Is like it's so unlikely statistically that if you bottom their card that you are going to win. The majority of the time you're going to tie. If it's the other way around and they reveal an 8 and you reveal an 8, to me it's a little more advantageous for you to go ahead and bottom that card because statistically you are more likely to win that with an 8. So just small things to keep in mind in these, like if you're tying or they're winning, right? Like a lot of times if it's that situation like I talked about where they're at an 8 and you're at a 6, just let it go, give them the gold. Yeah, it sucks, but like
let it go.
It is what it is. Like you didn't get to draw your card, but hey, guess what? They didn't get to draw a card either because this hero says the first time each turn you create a gold token from effect you control. That's the important part, right? They get a gold. It advances their game plan in that sense. It makes their cast stones better. It makes their golden suns better. It makes things better for them, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and you have to remember a lot of the time the extra card you're trying to draw, like you want the blue. So and even if you win a clash with, let's say, Pulverize, you're gonna draw a Pulverize that you can't play. So it's like, okay, well, what's the point of that?
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So it sounds like in certain scenarios too, like you're trying to get the second cycle with this deck.
Yeah. This is one of it really depends how the cards line up. Like if you win a bunch of clashes early and you see your customs, you're just off to the races. If it's a more typical game, or if you're getting high rolled by your opponent because your opponent's name is Justin Wong, then you might have to put your Goldmane estates to the bottom. Wait till you've got your 3 gold because you already cracked one, and to reclash, and you lost trounce twice still. And just play a more patient game.
So yeah, in general, the way I like to play is obviously, like you said, you're winning all these clashes. Obviously, just go. But if you're not, and you're playing the more mid-rangey style, like they're winning some, you're winning some, or you're tying everything, especially with this style of list, I would definitely want to lean towards like prolonging the game because this deck looks better than traditional or like the more common Victor list because you have the Pulverize, because you have Sync Belows, because you have the trounces that you can set up and pitch stack and do all these other things, right? It just makes sense that you would want to prolong, and you're also the best guardian in the world, so obviously you want the game longer because that means that you're going to beat them harder, right? That's how it goes.
And then your toxic masculinity can really be like,
I did it. I'm still the best guardian in the world. Yeah. Cool. So obviously Amir is going to be 50-50. I think this list actually might be a little bit favored in traditional. Would you agree?
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, just because of the pulverizes and some of the consistency there, right? And sync blows and
Another thing with Pulverize, I think we can mention quickly here is if you both go super late game, like you're gonna win on fatigue just because of deck damage. Like they're gonna give you 3 or their whole hand every time you play a Pulverize. If you resolve both Pulverizes, you're effectively 6 cards up, which means late game you are very much up.
Right, exactly. The only thing you have to worry about at that point is their Golden Suns and them setting them up. So as long as you are staying healthy and whatnot and playing smart, you should be able to cover that up. Have your armor and do what you need to. Cool. Good stuff. All right, so let's go to Dash. We're going to do Dash IE here. All right, so like you were talking about earlier, Time Skipper's Crown of Dominion. You're playing AtoZ here. Looks like you're just trying to kill him.
Trying to kill him. Even though we're on 63 cards. But because we have good block cards, all of our cards are good. It's kind of fine. I do sometimes go down 1 or even 2 choke slams in this matchup.
I do as well.
But yeah, that's probably, you can go down to 61. But yeah, you block efficiently, you kill them, but you have to remember there are turns where you can just block your whole hand if your hand
Sure.
sucks, even though you don't want to. You preserve some life so you can pulverize them at some point.
Right. Yep. Makes sense. I generally cut all the choke slam, at least for me. Um, having some number of choke slam if they are just on like the hyper aggro dash, like this card is like actually pretty decent because they play tempo
Yeah,
counters
that's
and
the
stuff like
reason I
that.
keep it in now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a little bit there that you can do, but like most of the time, I think 63 is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You're hedging one way or another, and your deck blocks pretty efficiently. You have good cards, like you said. You're pretty happy with most of this. Made sense to me. Send your go again cards. This is a matchup where Zealous Belting is obviously pretty decent into. It's just
Mm-hmm.
extra nines, like we talked about, right? Just
Yeah.
extra stuff, right?
Well, it's
So
11 in this matchup, so it's good.
oh, it is 11 because of the Anathos.
Yeah.
My bad. It's 11, so it's better. It's way
Yeah.
better. Cool. So in general, would you consider this matchup to be favored?
Actually would say so, yeah.
I think so
Like
too.
it's like a 50 or like a 52% maybe. Like it's not super favored, but
Sure.
especially with there's not really many turtle dash. It's funny. I think actually turtle dash is easier. I mean, I remember
I
at a pro
I
quest.
actually agree.
Yeah. It was like
Yep.
I played against Keegan. I think I won on like 36 health. This was before
Yeah.
cast
Yeah.
terms came out, and it was like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Same.
Um,
Same.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think it's favored. If they Unga Bunga you and like max V you like 3 times in the first like 5 turns, and you're kind of sad, but whatever.
Sure. So this
Yeah.
is assuming like a traditional transformation dash, like they have some pistol package plan. Like this is kind of what you're leaning towards.
This is like a hedge, I would say,
Sure.
because there's so few pistol dashes running around now. Like I feel like
That's
if you're
fair.
playing
That's
a
fair.
dash, yeah, yeah, they're just gonna be Unga Bunga. They'll start with the chamber, but then they're
Right.
trying to kill you.
Which makes a lot more sense why you're playing the choke slams and not cutting those. But um, in general, like if you're playing against the pistol dash, they start with the chamber, they play your purifiers and whatnot. They're not strictly like the control dash, like with all of the
Mm-mm.
constructions and like playing all these 3 blocks and just trying to get all of their items up. If they're just on that transformation package that we've seen for years, right?
Yeah.
Then that's where this like Anathos and the extra like time skippers and all that kind of stuff shines, right? So
Yes.
again, like you said, this is a hedge. Makes sense to me. I think
Hmm.
in general, most dashes, like of all varieties, are probably a little bit favored with the stack, and it's mainly because of these block cards.
Yeah, yeah. Against that transformation dash, actually, I should say, like if you know they're going to be playing plasma purifiers, what I like to do is I actually like to bottom the trounces and the test of strengths early. Like if they've only got one purifier on board and they're attacking for 3, and I've got an E-strike in hand, I'm not going to block off the test of strength. I'll E-strike it to the bottom, just because I
Sure,
know the game is going to go late enough where I can get the full 4 block off the test of strength.
sure, yeah,
And at that point, I'll know what I'm drawing into, which is
sure.
much better.
So same example, but replace that with the trounce. You're going ahead and blocking with the trounce because it is a full effect 3.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But if they're attacking for 2, like right, in the early game, and I don't need like I have another 3
right.
block in hand,
Yeah,
and the draw card is not going to be, not going to matter. I'll still bottom it.
sure. Yep, that makes sense. So yeah, I tend to agree with that as well. Just kind of the same thing with every matchup. You're extracting your value as efficiently as you can. If you do better numbers than your opponent, then you win the game. Right.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Closing thoughts?
Uh, no, I hate dash. I hope
Fair.
JL allows.
Fair. Okay. Next is Azelia. So Azelia, you're playing the balance of justice, you're playing your blocking equipment. This is what I do as well. We talked about how good Chokeslam is into this matchup, just like it is into Zens and whatnot. Command and Conquer is premium in this. Amazing card, disables, same thing. You're playing sync blows into this. Let's look at the cards that you're not playing. So to me, this kind of makes sense for obvious reasons, but tell the viewers why you're taking these out.
Like you just never get to cast Pulverize,
Right.
because you want to block quite a lot, and even if you don't block, you're usually under some effect like a fatigue shot, and you're like
Right.
Pulverize for 7 is not very good. Zealous Belt, you don't need to go wide. Rouse Ancient, same thing. It's cutting the block 2s in place of the hold the line as a direct, just slightly better.
Sure.
going down to 30 blues. But yeah, and I'm cutting one Boulder Drop. Just just to make it as lean as possible. You could keep it in there. But surprise, surprise, against the hero that says uh put the top card of your deck into your arsenal against Dominate.
Yeah.
A card like Boulder Drop isn't as good.
Right. Yeah. That's definitely fair. Is yeah, it's hand disruption, but like you're honestly giving them a little bit of utility in a way too. Like if they're big brained enough, they can actually blow you out with it, which is kind of
Yeah,
funny.
exactly.
It's just like,
You're
oh,
like, oh,
okay, oh yeah, I'll take that. Put my fatigue shot right here, buddy.
exactly.
No, that's fair. That's fair. So, yeah. So this is general disruption game plan. Block where you can, send it. Almost kind of like Zen, not quite, because they
Mm,
attack at a different axis. A lot of times, I would say that the majority of their on hits we really just don't care about. The main
yeah.
one that we do care about, obviously, is fatigue shot. Fatigue shot is very hard to deal with because the way we interact with them is by sending attacks. When our attacks are halved, like that's pretty bad. So
Mm-hmm.
that, and then niche situations are things like seek and destroy or inertia or anything like that. Like if you're holding on to like a pummel in your arsenal that you're really trying to make sure that you got a command and conquer something, but you drew your all blue hand, you're just like, ugh, gross. Now you
Yeah.
have to like, hope that your one of your blues is disabled or something, and have tune and counter up. I know. So, any other thoughts on this kind of matchup besides the things that I talked about?
No, not so much. Obviously, there's some slightly different variations of Azelia going
Sure.
around, like Sand Scour, or even some people run what do you call it, Dreadbore, if they think
Right.
you're super defensive. But in general, it's a pretty straightforward matchup. You don't want it to go too long as well, especially against a good Azelia player. Um, you're gonna get dominated to death, like at the end game. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's like kind of pick your spot, right? Like there's if you're getting dominated, you're only blocking with one card, but the way that you're structuring the deck, especially with the 30 blues, is that you're going to have the majority of like you'll have gas, right? You'll have things to do. So, and then if you don't have things to do, you can sink below and then kind of dig for that thing to do, right? So that's why there's so many of these cards. If they are dominating a lot, obviously these block cards get a little bit worse because you can't necessarily extract full value out of like a 4 card hand. But that's why we're playing things like E-Strike to help kind of extract that value. And then obviously like pummels and stuff like that help you extract that value too. You have to have the pummel in your hand. You can't draw it off of
Mhm.
or off of your tester strength or anything like that. But you get what I'm saying.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
makes sense.
Uh,
Go ahead.
I will also mention, I think this is the matchup where our blues are the best. There's a lot of situations where
Yep.
you just play out a cranial crush or a
Yep.
disable or even a blue choke slam. It actually does quite a lot against him. So don't
Right.
like sleep on these in this matchup.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're playing reds of these blues anyway. So there's obvious
Mhm.
reason like the other colors, right? Just the blues are going to be pretty good still. So they don't want to actively block very often, right? They want to like use their whole hand. And if you catch them on a hand where they have 3 pumps and an arrow and they don't have an arrow in arsenal or something, or you were able to disrupt them, they don't have an arsenal at all, or something along those lines, right? Then
Mhm.
you sending that and then forcing to block with like let's say they're playing perch grapplers or something weird, right? That's not
Mhm.
normal nowadays, but they have to give you like 2 of their pumps. That's like super annoying. So yeah, yeah, for sure. Deck pretty solid against Azelia. I would consider this to be favored, not insanely, because a
No.
good Azelia
No,
can
not
really
good.
beat you up. But
Yeah. Yeah. And they can just nut on you,
exactly,
like yeah. Then you're like, well, bye.
they do the Starvo thing, but today,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
crazy.
But that's what happened to me in PTLA round two. I was against Azelia. My Miller's Grindstone was on 2 counters by turn two,
Oh
and I
man,
was on like 21 health or something. I was like, cool, I'll just go shoot myself.
yeah, yeah. Go take a lunch break. That's what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Unfortunate. Sorry to hear that for you. But hey, we're going to talk about Enigma now. The new hotness, just like
Yeah.
Zen and new. So this is the last MST hero that we're talking about. You're
Hmm.
playing Crown of Dominion, you're playing AtoZ, Vambrace, Time Skippers. You're just
Not
playing
that
like the whole
Creativist.
shebang.
No. Yeah,
What's
the
that?
Creativist shouldn't be in there. That's a no. I've got the Creativist in there, but that's a mistake. Obviously, you can't have two forearms.
Sure, sure. Yeah, so
Yeah,
no Crater Fist. We have 6 here, so
yeah,
don't play the Crater
yeah.
Fist. AtoZ, Crown of Dominion, Final Spring Tunic, Time Skippers, and Vambrace. So you only have
Yeah.
one block in your equipment, but again, like we've
Oh,
been
I've
talking
got
about.
2 of their band brace.
Ah,
I'll
yeah,
give
yeah,
you
yeah.
pay one.
That's right, that's right. But I guess you could like Tunic Vambrace. I have done that before. Um,
Mm.
like to pay for the block, not to pay for the piece, but I've done that as well. But yeah, one block, but your goal in this game is to just like contain their board, right?
Contain their board and do big damage so that
Right.
your kind of your evasive damage, being the golden suns at the end of the game, are gonna kill them.
Right. Yep. So big damage. Obviously, we're playing pulverizes and
Mhm.
spinals and that kind of stuff. Let's look at the cards that you're siding out. So you're siding out Disable, Sink Below. Obviously, the D reacts against a deck where you're trying to be
Mm.
aggressive and whatnot and contain their board because they play board state to be defensive. You don't need defense there. You need
Mhm.
aggression to stop that, right? Then you're taking out the Boulder Drops and the Disable. So one
Mhm.
thing to note is that the spinals and the disables are really good with Vambrace, like we talked about a little bit earlier. That kind of makes them pseudo Thunderquakes. So why don't you explain why you're not playing Disable?
Yeah, just disable it being a red in a matchup where we're playing the pulverizers just makes it a little bit less consistent. But
Sure,
also the on hit against Enigma is very, very rarely relevant.
that's true.
Because they run so many directs, so many instants, they just clear the arsenal. So
Right.
this is just vanilla 5 for 9, which if we're running the Zealous Doubtings and the Roused Ancients and even the Time Skippers, like we just have better plays than
Sure.
5 for 9. Yeah.
Yep. So that makes sense. That's kind of the thought process I had as well.
Mhm.
Um, Again, there's still a little bit of merit to playing these 5 costs just because of the
Mhm.
Vambrace and whatnot. But it's the same difference. It's like you have better cards to play. You might as well play the better cards, right?
Yeah.
And you are playing the 32 blues, no extra hold the line. But
Mhm.
because you're going a little bit lower in deck size, you have a little bit more consistency with this Pulverize, which makes sense. Matchup is pretty dependent on these like block cards as well. I've seen just
Yeah.
like the amount of value that you extract from these block cards is very good because like we were talking about a little bit earlier too, um, you're kind of pitching the Goldmane estates like to later in the game, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
these block cards are
Yeah.
then going to snowball, and then when you play your Goldmane estate and you can line up a Golden Sun, it's going to be for like 20 or something crazy.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah,
Cool.
and a lot of times that game ends on a pummeled golden sun for like, as you said, 20.
Yeah, yeah. It's like crazy numbers. Did you see that Twitter post, kind of tangent, where I showed that Golden Sun coming in for like 40?
Yeah, yeah. And there's people doing crazy stuff, right? Like remembrancing back the estates and just going ham and
Yeah, yeah. I took that from a
whatever.
Discord, and I credited the guy there in the comments. But they came in with 40. They pitched a Command and Conquer against a Riptide with a blue to send 40, and then he got buzzsaw trapped. But the funniest part about that whole picture is that the Command and Conquer was in the pitch, and he could have just played Command and Conquer and won the game on the spot. So
Oh, what a grief.
I know it was awesome. It was awesome. But yeah, so big golden suns are obviously very fun, but certain
Yeah.
situations maybe not. Maybe just don't oonga boonga big masculinity do thing
Yeah.
right. Like you know, take the time. It's all right. So
Yeah.
in general, with this configuration of the deck, do you believe Enigma to be favored? Even
I want to say slightly favored against the traditional Enigma. Like if they play like Iris or something, I don't know, but like just the
yeah,
standard type, I would say slightly
yeah,
favored. But
Cosmo, the
yeah,
normal scroll. Yeah,
yeah, normal scroll book reading nerds.
yeah, that's right.
Um,
That's right.
I think this matchup comes down a lot to how effectively you can resolve your pulverizers. I think that's the best card in the matchup, and how essentially disruptive your gold mining estates can be.
So is Pulverize a card that you're generally trying to like Arsenal?
Yeah, or even Heath. Like a lot, sometimes like if because Enigma has these setup turns, right, where they're
Right,
like they don't do anything. You can effectively you can like spinal crush them and then heave a pulverize.
right.
And and then with your tunic up, it's like cool. You can do whatever now. Next turn, I can resolve. I can block 2 cards and play this Pulverize.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. I'm gonna start messing around with Pulverize before Rosetta comes out. Before I have to start thinking about other things, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
You're just
Cool.
like, you have
So
12 ward, bye.
yeah, right. Yeah, it's super good. And then you have Vambrace on top of that. It's like a 15 at that point. Oh man, so good.
Oh.
Okay, so now we're gonna get to a matchup. The two last matchups are the Ks. All right, so we're gonna
Okay.
start with KO, and then we'll talk about Kano. And what do we say
Uh,
to Kano?
we say no.
That's right. That's right. So
Don't
that's why
exist.
he's at the end. We don't want to mess with him. But KO, hey yo,
Hey,
what are we
hey,
doing
yo.
against this guy?
Actually, it's the same mentality as going into new because I feel like a long game into KO, we're not that favored. So I'm just going playing the lottery a little bit.
Yeah,
With the Crown of Dominion, I still have all the disruptive cards. I run the Sync Belows and the Hold the Lines, obviously, as good tools.
sure,
You can obviously stuff a pulping if they play into it, which isn't
sure.
that often, but again, it can filter your hand, it blocks well. And you just hit them and you pummel them, and then hopefully they die.
Sure. Yep. Makes sense. So one thing I've gone back and forth on is playing Trounce, not playing Trounce.
Mm.
Like there are situations where it like can be okay. I think it makes more sense with this configuration because of the way the deck is built, right? That maybe you don't want to play that. You would prefer to play something
Mm.
like the Sync Below. But has there been a situation where you have played Trounce into KO
So
and like,
yeah, this is the only iteration of the deck where I am not playing Trounce. Every other iteration I've always played Trounce.
okay,
Just because if you win, you're very far ahead, and a lot of time you're not double losing.
right,
And previously, when the PT LA list with sigils and sinks and all that, like I was pitch stacking the Trounces, so we're never losing, most of the time winning in the late game. But yeah, that was like a different
but
time
you were
where
fatiguing with that.
exactly.
Yeah,
It's a different style. Whereas here, like the sink below is just block more, and we've already got the 2 gold on board starting into this matchup, so we don't really need the extra gold for the
sure,
estates.
sure.
We just want efficiency.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Is we're not playing Balance of Justice into KO, which is like the blood or
Mm.
spell deck of the format.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're trying to be aggressive, which that does make sense. If you're just like
Mm.
you're trying to do better numbers than them, which in general is kind of hard to do. But if you could win like one test of strength, I think you definitely have a chance. If you
Yes.
win no test of strength, most of the time it feels like pretty hard, like super hard, honestly. But
Yeah, it's pretty hard.
yeah, so in
Yeah.
general, it makes sense to cut the 2 blocks. One thing in the list that I've been talking about that I've been kind of messing around with is because I am playing the Clash of Mites because it's a little bit better
Mhm.
into things like Zen and whatnot, just to be able to push your things up to like a 7 breakpoint, like these on hits like Weakest Link, which you're not playing in this list, which makes sense while you're playing Clash Figure. Clash of Might is awful into Brute.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like so bad. And it's just like, I want to cut the card, but the only other option is to play Rousing Ancients, which is also just a 2 block. So it's just like, do you gamble and try to win the Might, or do you not and then give them like a Command and Conquer for 8 this time instead of 7? You're just like,
yeah,
uh,
exactly. And that's part of the reason I didn't go with Clash of Might. Even I do love that card too. It's just when New Zealand meta, we have some die-hard, even Rhinar fans, but just Brute fans in general, where I'm going to play against one at a big tournament, and I'm not going to give them, yeah, as you say, CNC for 8. I don't
yeah,
want.
exactly. So yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, Clash of Vigor is at least a little bit better into them. They can use the resource too, of course, right?
Yeah.
It just means that they don't have to use Tunic, or you get them their Tunic counter on an off turn. But all that being said, this matchup is not amazing.
No, it's not, but
So
it's winnable.
it is winnable for sure. Um, I think that your previous list that you played at Pro Tour is way more consistent into KO, but it
Yeah,
was a completely different style build, right?
yeah, it's a
So
different hero at that point,
right,
you know.
yeah. But this was also before Sash was out, I believe.
Yeah, and before Run Bloodshot, whatever
Right.
came out.
Right. Yeah. So completely different style. They got better. We have to adjust. Makes sense. But still
Exactly.
unfavored.
Hmm.
Winnable, but unfavored.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about this one. Our favorite matchup.
Yeah. Again, no Crater Fist, even though we
No
wish
credit
we
fist.
could.
You
Just
might
the
as well at
AB1.
this point. Let's be real. Like
Yeah, like
we
honestly, it might be worth it.
it's, I mean, hey, you're gonna AB you're gonna be
What am I
AB
ABing
won
anyway?
their wildfare for
Yeah.
6 because it's gonna go down to 5 and then they're gonna like blazing you for 18 and you're gonna AB it down to 17. You're gonna like, okay,
Wow, great.
I died
I'm
at
only on
negative.
negative 40.
Yeah. I'm negative 40 instead of negative 45. Good job. Yeah. So
Yeah, that's yeah, not the greatest matchup. We just try to go wide and kill them as much as possible. A lot of the time, it's not gonna get to your tunic counter on 3, unfortunately. It
that
really
is true.
depends also how they are playing. If they've got that list where it's like they're running all the sinks and the fates in there, doing the wizardry crap where they're walking through their house in their mind or whatever.
Yeah. The mime palace.
Yeah. Could get there, honestly. But honestly, AB1, if they're just playing a normal list, you with unpreventable damage, you just die.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless you get really lucky.
Yeah, I have gotten really lucky one time to where I got all the way down to 1. I was playing 0 AB. I was attacking them down. And they try to go off. They hit like gaze, they hit all these like cantripping cards, and then they hit a blazing, and then they couldn't blazing me for any damage because Metacarpus Nose doesn't work on it. So I literally just killed them being at 1 because they were just like, oh, okay, I'll just
Oh,
kill you. And
good.
they just
Oh,
didn't hit
better. Yeah.
anything. I was like, that's insane.
Yeah.
That's like
They could have
actually
just waited to their turn to kill you, but they were like,
exactly.
no.
Exactly. They like pitched an arcane damaging spell and they're just like, I'll find it, I'm sure. Oh no, I died. So, all that being said, of course, this is the worst matchup. It's nigh unwinnable unless they're on that like pitch stacking, like big brain style, the guy who goes to the
Mm.
library style. They're just sitting there reading all their cards and seeing everything and whatnot. Um, but yeah, I mean, like, give it your honest shot. Go fast, kill them. But that, I mean, it is what it is. And then this is the matchup, and this is why you have these cards in the board, right? The board. This
Mm.
is like basically the main matchup that you're not playing any of these, right?
Yeah.
And then
But
obviously,
it's
like,
unplayable, yeah.
yeah, I mean, like every single one of these cards is literally unplayable into this hero
Yeah.
because they don't attack you. So, like, this is why this matchup is so bad, is because our whole point of playing Victor is we want to block with these block cards, extract value from winning these clashes, and then draw extra cards, and then we deal better cycles that way. When you take that away from us, it's pretty difficult to do anything with that, and we have to play like a mediocre guardian plan with like worse disruption, right?
Hmm.
Like, we got Golden Sun, we can pressure a little bit there, and that's fine, but
We
like
only
we're
got one
literally
gold.
right. Yeah, we got 1 gold because of the Crown of Dominion, but it's like
Yeah.
it's almost like we're playing worse Bravo at this point.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We just have worse cards. So, which is a great segue on how to beat Victor, which is the final segment of this before we wrap this up. So, how do you
Yeah.
beat Victor? Obviously, pick up Kano and get like 2 reps with the deck, and then you can probably beat the majority of Victors.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what else is pretty good against him? I'd have to think about that. Why don't you tell us?
I think if you deny Victor the equity he has from his block cards as much as possible, so that can look like having more big powers in your deck. Like if you're running Command and Conquers in your deck, if you're an illusionist and you've got the Miraging Metamorphs, it just means that Victor is more unlikely to win all of his clashes, which essentially makes his hero power useless. Um, which is pretty bad when you don't have a hero power.
Exactly.
Or playing in a way like a setup game where his block cards, like even if he gets the value, it doesn't matter. Like we kind of mentioned how Azelia, you can set up I don't know, I think 19 dominated remorseless to end the game, and you can sit there with a Sink Below an Arsenal and a full block in hand. It's not going to really do anything. It's
Right.
all the on hits are going to come through. Something like that. Or even I've noticed really good dash opponents early game, they won't attack. Like they if they don't have a really good turn, they'll take the turn off the setup just because just in the off chance that you've got a block card in your hand, you can't utilize it. Which
Sure.
like when you do, you're like, what am I gonna do? I have to put it away, right?
Right.
So yeah. So I think those are the main ways, essentially to deny the hero what he's good at, and also like don't try to race the hero. I feel like some people are like, oh, I'm just gonna take this 9, I'm gonna take this like 14 or whatever, and I'm just gonna throw
It's a good
more
way to
back.
die.
Like, yeah, your life matters, and oh, that was really deep. Your life matters. Yeah,
For sure.
um,
For sure.
yeah.
You heard it
But
here.
no, but Vic, yeah, we love you.
That's right.
Come and talk to us if you yeah.
Absolutely.
Anyway, Victor, all of his cards block. Well, most of his cards block if on rate or above rate. So even if you're throwing a billion back, his game plan can change. So yeah,
Yeah.
adapt to what they're doing as well. Because some Victors are gonna just come at you like balls to the wall. In which case, like they're gonna run out of gas at some point as well.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with all of that. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I want to note is you were giving examples of decks that we were going through that we said were unfavored into us,
Mm-hmm.
which is actually a brilliant way to think about it. It's like, sure, you may be unfavored, but that's where the skill definition about this game, that's why Flesh and Blood is so cool, is that
Mm-hmm.
like, sure, you might be a little unfavored. It might be like 40-60 or whatever, but like you said earlier, it was like, hey, earlier in the tournaments or whatever, uh, even if it is 40-60, you can skill gap an opponent and still kind of get there, right? Which is like
Mm-hmm.
super cool. Like, perfect example would be, I played a tournament and I played against a KO and they were like newer to KO and I was able to skill gap them even though the matchup is like pretty poor and I was losing all of my clashes. I was still able to extract as much value as needed to be able to finish off the game, right? So same thing the reverse way, you know, I think it's awesome that Dash is, even though you don't like Dash, but I think it's super cool that some people have like figured out like, oh, if my turn is really middling and they likely have block cards, how about I just play this Teclo Pounder and pass the turn
Yeah.
and then set up like this crazy turn afterwards? Like, hey, that makes sense. And that's always been pretty good against Guardian too, because we have a hard time extracting our full hand as a value without blocking, right? So that's always been a Guardian thing is if you give us a full hand, yeah, sometimes we can do something with it if we have like a pulverized tunic counter and 3 blues, but like a lot of times it's like, oh, you gave us a full hand and I have an arsenal. I guess I'll play the spinal, like worst case scenario for you, and then keep one card and IP myself. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's super mid. So that's a great point. Just in
Hey, that's
general
why I
though.
like Credit Fist. You can
Yeah,
always use
exactly.
the blue.
That's
Just pop it.
exact
Yeah.
dude, that's crazy. I gotta play Crater Fist now too. I still got my cold foil. I gotta give it some reps, man. So
Yeah.
talking about this, just to kind of wrap it up, like you said, I think that's all great in a general sense, but just to give the viewers kind of idea of like if they have like a local victor just running rampant and they're beating everybody and you really want to beat them, I would say play some Kano. If you got the Kano cards, that's like the easiest way to just blow them up. Yeah, you might have to learn some other matchups, but it's pretty good. Um, let's see. The news. New is pretty strong into Victor, kind of hard to deal with as long as you can prolong the game, play a little bit defensive. The more news that play like the defense reactions and the like disruption hat is super annoying. I always hate playing against that. There's also the potential for them to do the traverse plan and do a combo turn, which is also pretty decent, but they're a little more defensive. So there's different avenues that are really bad for Victor either way. And then, of course, the brutes, especially KO, are pretty hard. So easiest one to learn if you wanted to try it out would be KO to be able to beat up your local Victor. But yeah, overall, Victor pretty good right now, and I've had a
Yeah.
great time
Not
playing
bad.
him. So
Yeah. Like
He's a
you,
good
it's
horse.
just fun. Like it's just like, especially I feel like most card game players, is some have some sort of degenerate gambler inside them. Where
Exactly.
yeah, when you
Exactly.
win that clash, it just feels so good.
Dude, I know the first time, like I was testing it online on Talishar, and I was like, okay, this clash card is pretty cool. It's making tokens and I'm doing things. Like this is great. But the first time you play it in paper, you're just like
Yeah, you
boom.
like bring out all three tokens, right? You're like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, and you're like,
everyone
okay, okay. Okay, I want that one. All right, bottom. Boom. That's like gosh. Crack. That's like a pummel or something. Ah, okay, okay. Crack. I'm gonna bottom this. Oh, there's a cranial crush. Boom, boom, my card is it's so good. It's so fun.
and the
I
first
love
time you
it.
reveal a golden sun or like a thunk and you win, you're just
Oh my
like,
god. Oh my
oh.
god. Oh yeah. Quick rules note. If you trounce and you reveal a golden sun as your first card, you do trigger to make the gold, but you resolve the trounce beforehand, so the golden sun goes on the bottom. So you don't get to draw that card immediately. Just by the way. So, but you get 2 gold, which is pretty cool. And then even if
Yeah,
you lose the trounce, you still draw the card.
even if you lose, you still draw. That's the best
Exactly.
part.
Exactly. Cool. Well, Dennis, it's been a pleasure. Do you have any closing thoughts besides what we talked about, Victor being fun and all that?
No, just everyone give this hero a go. I think a lot of people sleep on Guardians because they think it's like boring, or like you just all you do is
Right.
fatigue and CNC pummel, which is somewhat true. But like,
Sure.
give it a go, even if you're like a super aggressive player, because I think a deck like Victor really helps any player really kind of upskill themselves in terms of understanding like turn to turn value of a game.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
even things like, if everyone's like, oh, I can't memorize my pitch stack, whatever, you don't need to. But like playing a deck like Victor, like play a couple of mirrors, it's going to help you understand those fundamentals a little bit better. And even
Right.
if you never play the hero again, like that's going to better you as a player in general
Exactly.
and whatever hero you play. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, Guardian has always been good about teaching you fundamentals, like when do you block, when do you attack, all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Always good. And then he's just the most fun right now. Let's be real. He's just
Yeah.
the most fun
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. It's so fun.
Well, cool. Well, we're gonna wrap this up.
Mhm.
Appreciate you being my guest. You've been great. It's been a lot of fun. We need to do this more often. I like chatting with you. But I
Yes.
want to go
Thanks
ahead.
for having me.
Absolutely. I want to go ahead and thank our sponsors, Fabric.gg, Magnolia Games, and Dragon Shield. We've talked about them forever, but you guys know we love them, and they bring you this content, and we can keep doing this kind of stuff. And we keep seeing you at events and doing all this great stuff. Dennis, do you have any shout outs?
Um, no, good, no.
No.
No. Just put me on the spot. I was like, no, I don't like anyone.
I mean, that's fair. You shout me out. That's all right.
Yeah, I love Edward Kim.
That's right.
That's it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and Nathan Crawford and Josh Lau and all the card guys. That's
Yeah, yeah. Who are
I
the
love
other
it.
ones? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That's fair.
Yeah, everyone.
Yeah, everyone.
No,
Shout out everyone.
yeah, shout out everyone. I mean, hopefully see everyone. I mean, not just you guys, but people at Worlds.
Yeah,
That's gonna be exciting.
that'll be good. Yeah, get that 5-year
Yeah,
pack. That's right. That's
yeah,
right. It's gonna be sweet. Do
yeah.
you know what it does? Do you have the intel?
No, no, actually,
That's
people
fair.
just
That's
assume
fair.
because we live in New Zealand, we know everything. Like
Right.
we know
Right.
like all the cards 7 sets down the
See,
line now.
I just assumed. I just assumed. You
Yeah,
know. Well, cool, man.
we would be good at the game if we knew that. No.
Oh yeah, yeah. You just said that you're gonna win the World Cup.
Yeah, not because of me, because of Dr. Dan Mackay.
Oh, okay, okay. Makes
Yeah.
sense. Makes sense. All right, dude. Well, I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure, and
All right.
we will see everybody else in the next A to Z. Bye.
Catch you later. Bye bye.